And we're going to have invocation by Kevin Hankey from Beth Emanuel in Hudson. All rise, please.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you and speed your deliberations. The Lord look upon you with favor and give your work for the county and the state of Wisconsin peaceful results. About 15 years ago, I met a man when I was in my young 30s in the ministry, and he slid something across the table to me. You remember those round tuits they used to have to get people to do things? Here's a round tuit. Well, he slid something that was wood, and it looked like that. And I said, what's this, a round tuit? And he said, no. He says, it represents my business, and it had Wezzo oil on it. And it had something else on the back side. And I said, so what am I supposed to do with this? And he says, well, do you know what God's will is for your life? And I'm going, well, not specifically. Do you know what God's will is for my life? And he very emphatically said, yes, I do. And I'm going, well, how can you know God's will for my life? You don't know me. He said, well, see, I retired from business. He had a good pension and a good salary. And he said he didn't want to just sit around. He was in his 60s, and he liked to repair sewing machines. So he started repairing sewing machines. He had a good business. And he also had been in the military, and he had access to some overseas oils, and he invented his own sewing machine oil called Wezzo oil. And he struggled and struggled with what he was going to do. Should he continue just working on the sewing machines as a repairman and use his oil, or should he develop his oil, or should he do both? And he was just like a horse on a fence. He didn't know what to do, and he cried out to God one morning. He says, God, what is your will? So he started looking through Scripture, and he ran across this passage. God's will for you is, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you. And he thought, no matter what I decide, if I have the attitude of thankfulness, it's going to change everything and affect my interactions. And I was thinking about that last night as my wife and I were coming back from Panera in Woodbury, and I thought, that's what I think I'm supposed to tell you, is rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. And I'm teaching a Bible class on Philippians tomorrow morning and Sunday, and I wanted to share you a similar verse from Philippians 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. May God bless your deliberations today and for the rest of the month.
Thank you. We'll have a pledge of allegiance now.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Cindy, you have roll call. Not working. Andy Brinkman's excused. He'll be back a little later. Thank you. We have the consent agenda. We made a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Austin, seconded by Supervisor Peavy. Any discussion? No discussion. Unanimous, thank you. At this time, we have a time for public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment at this time? Nobody, no public comment? We'll move on with the agenda, thank you. We'll get into the annual department reports. We got the circuit judges and family court commissioner annual report first. The judges are here, Judge Lundell, Judge Needham.
Right, Judge Vlack is on vacation right now, so obviously can't be with us. What I'm going to do is read my report, and then I'm going to interrupt it on occasion to have various other people speak to the county board. So my report is entitled "The Courts of St. Croix County." I was sort of catching myself, but. All right, circuit courts of St. Croix County consist of 4 branches, numbered 1 through 4. Historically, Branch 1 was considered to be the first branch created by the state legislature in 1978. I preside over Branch 1. Branch 2 was created by the same legislative act. Judge Edward Vlack presides over Branch 2. This branch was formerly the county judge position. In 1994, Branch 3 was created. District 10 Chief Judge Scott Needham presides over Branch 3. Then in 2008, Branch 4 was created. Judge Howard Cameron presides over that branch. At times, people are confused as to which courtroom is assigned to which branch. When this courthouse was opened in 1993 as Branch 1 judge, I got to select whichever courtroom in which I was most comfortable. So I selected courtroom 3. Judge Richards, as Branch 2 judge, selected courtroom 1. In 1994, Judge Needham selected courtroom 4, although he has since switched to courtroom 2 in 2008. When Judge Vlack was elected Branch 2 judge in 2001, he took over courtroom 1. Finally, when Judge Cameron was elected in 2008, he moved into the recently vacated courtroom 4. So therefore, the courtrooms were selected by history, not for convenience. So. Each judge has a judicial assistant and a court reporter assigned to him. The judicial assistant is a county employee, while the court reporter is a state employee. Starting with Branch 1, my judicial assistant is Kim Carey. My court reporter is Valerie Dice. Branch 2, Judge Vlack's judicial assistant is Nancy Bierbauer, and his digital court reporter is Elizabeth Frank. Branch 3, Judge Needham's judicial assistant is Jody Saxenmeyer, and his court reporter is Vicki Kasten. Branch 4, Judge Cameron's judicial assistant is Katie Lindis, and his court reporter is Aaron Drost. Erica Nelson, our Register and Probate and Juvenile Court Clerk of Court, has a deputy, Leslie Bauer, and Kimberly Kitzberger, the Juvenile Services Clerk. The Court Commissioner's Office has Brenda Kearns as its full-time assistant. Brenda essentially manages the Court Commissioner's Office. Speaking of the St. Croix County's 4 circuit judges, we collectively have sat on the bench a total of 64 full years. That averages out to 16 years of experience per circuit judge. We do believe that we are fully capable of handling any case assigned to us. we never have to ask for a more experienced judge to handle a case for us. Speaking of cases, as of July 31, 2014, that's the most recent statistic here, our 4 branches were assigned to a total of 1,580 total cases. That breaks down to a total of 266 felonies, 221 misdemeanors, 122 criminal traffic cases, 292 contested traffic or ordinance citations, 216 family cases, and 128 juvenile and probate cases. Now, those are the open cases as they were as of July 31. Obviously, we close cases as fast as we can, so that accounts for a lot of that. Cases are assigned to each one of us randomly by computer drawing, with the exception of cases that are heard for the first time during our 2-week stint as the intake judge. During intake weeks, whatever criminal defendants appear for their first appearance, that case becomes that judge's. Similarly, all new initial appearance traffic defendant cases are assigned to that intake judge. Juvenile cases are handled the same way. Chapter 51 cases involving new mental health appearances or new chemical dependency appearances are generally kept by that intake judge. Christy Severson is our acting clerk of court. As you are all aware, our previous clerk of court, Lori Meyer, has resigned to take a position with Anoka County. Christy, you'd like to come up here and say a few words?
Good morning, Chair Larson and ladies and gentlemen of the County Board. My name is Christy Severson, and as Judge Lindell stated, I was appointed to the St. Croix County by the St. Croix County judges to complete Lori Meyer's term as Clerk of Court. I worked in the Clerk of Court office since 1994 and just reached my 20-year anniversary with the department and the county in May. I've held the positions of Court Clerk, Financial Assistant, and then for the last 11 years, Office Manager, Chief Deputy. I am both honored and excited to be serving as Clerk of Court. The mission of the Clerk of Court's office is to provide administrative and record-keeping services to the Circuit Court and the citizens of St. Croix County. The office consists of several divisions, including jury, civil, small claims, family, paternity, traffic, criminal, financials, county ordinance violations, and juvenile ordinance violations. Each division provides specialized support services for all of the court activities related to these departments. In order to successfully perform our duties, the Clerk of Court staff work in partnership with the judges, the court commissioners, the judicial staff, as well as the Register and Probate, Child Support Agency, District Attorney Office, and many other county departments, the Sheriff's Department, the Wisconsin State Patrol, the municipal and other municipal law enforcement agencies, as well as attorneys, the Department of Corrections, DNR, and numerous other state and municipal agencies. Some of the goals and accomplishments that we did achieve in the last 12 months were the implementation of e-filing for our civil, small claims, and family divisions. We are one of 25 or so Wisconsin counties that offer this service. What e-filing does, it allows attorneys as well as pro se litigants to electronically file new cases and gives them the ability to see their cases online. What this means for the courts is that basically we're paperless, so no more searching for documents or files. They are now available 24 hours a day. The judges are able to use a dashboard to view and review the files at their convenience. We are waiting for the state to approve e-filing in our paternity division in the next few months. We're excited that our traffic division moved to paperless at the beginning of 2014. We have already been receiving the majority of our 6,000 to 8,000 citations a year electronically, but in prior years, we were printing all of these citations and creating paper files for contested cases. We no longer have to do that, and instead have streamlined our processes and relied on our CCAP software and various interfaces to dispose of these cases. Our county ordinance and juvenile ordinance divisions will be going paperless this month, and small claims in 2015. This will mean less paper files to purge in the future, and trust me, my staff is very excited about that. The Clerk of Court staff has worked very diligently to complete the last pay for performance cycle. Many personal and departmental goals which include records management and cross-training initiatives, amongst various others, were achieved that will benefit not only staff and the courts, but the public as well. In early August, you, the county board, approved making our part-time deputy clerk position a full-time position. This position will assist with coverage at our front counter, as well as clerking for the judges and court commissioners, and we are so very appreciative of that. The past 12 months has also been a time of challenges. Since August 2013, our department has lost 5 of our 15 long-term employees, frontline employees. 2 staff members retired, and 3 others pursued employment outside of the county. Our financial assistant, Ruth Spencer, will retire after 25 years with the clerk of court in November, and we have another going on maternity leave in November. Consequently, we have 5 employees with 6 months or less on the job. And training of new staff is a time-consuming process, but imperative so that we are proficient in our duties. Mastering our software program, learning department policies, processes, and procedures, understanding the flow of work through the department in general, as well as the details in each of their assigned divisions, takes a great deal of knowledge and expertise. As the number of pro se, or non-represented litigants, continues to increase, and the complexity of those legal needs rise, having well-trained and informed staff becomes even more critical. In the midst of these changes, our well-established leadership team was moved to transition mode when Lori Meyer announced that she was leaving after serving as clerk of court for the past 22 years. Lori, myself, and our lead worker, Melissa Warwick, together have been guiding, mentoring, and coaching this department for the last 11 years. The clerk of court staff is dealing with the transition period, but they remain loyal and dedicated to the department, the courts, and in serving the public to the best of their abilities. I am very proud of our staff and the work that the clerk of court office has performed over the last year, and I want to thank the judges for their continued support, the administration committee as our parent committee, and you, the county board, for your interest in what we do. Thank you.
Whatever. In previous years, there has been mention of adding a 5th branch to our judiciary here in St. Croix County. You should know that presently our caseloads fully support at least 4 circuit judges. Should case levels increase dramatically, as they have on several other occasions since 1989, we as a county must be ready. We will not be able to get a 5th circuit judge while we only have 4 courtrooms. We urge you as county board members to become proactive in this planning process. With the anticipated growth prompted by the completion of the new St. Croix River Bridge near Stillwater, our northern corridors near the 3564 freeway will quickly be developed. With this new population growth, together with more cases filed due to increased 3564 traffic, our caseloads should rapidly increase. We also report to you, board members, that our St. Croix County Drug Court continues to maintain numbers of participants. Presently, that number is 12, with several more being considered. The drug court routinely has its participants graduate and move on to sober and fulfilling lives. Drug court continues to make a difference here in St. Croix County. It has taken a prominent role in our county's response to the heroin and meth epidemics. Judge Black should be commended, as well as drug court coordinator Amber Perry. Our fairly new juvenile treatment court continues to operate and change the lives of our troubled youth here in St. Croix County. Intentionally operating with only a select few youth, the juvenile treatment court team is able to use scarce resources in its attempt to change the lives of these troubled youth. Again, kudos to Judge Black for taking on these challenging youth. Recently, Kimberly Hitzberger was changed from part-time to full-time, is now able to give the juvenile treatment court 20 hours per week in her capacity as the new juvenile services clerk. Erica Nelson continues to be a state leader in her work as our Register in Probate and Juvenile Clerk of Court. She's now on numerous state committees, including the Records Management Committee. We are indeed very fortunate to have Erica Nelson working for all of us. Erica, say a few words.
Thanks, Judge. Good morning. Erica Nelson, that's common spelling on Nelson, so you don't get confused. Judge touched on several things, and so did Christie, especially with the self-represented litigants. We spend a lot of time with them, especially on the probate and the guardianship cases. In my office is the branch of the circuit court that deals with the probate and the juvenile. So we get a lot of pro se, a lot of, as Judge Needham has said before, a lot of vulnerable people. They don't ask to come to our court. They come to us. They just get there. In addition to those duties, I'm the court official for the probate files. We also do the clerking, the case management, and of all the court files in our office. And I also am the judge's court office manager. So the budget, the supervision, the buffer between the administration and the judges at times. And the treatment court, I wanted to touch on, we're almost at full capacity for 6 juveniles. And in 2 weeks, we will have a graduation. So that's exciting news for the team. That's just a brief overview. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. Thank you.
In the past year or so, the St. Croix County Community Justice Collaborating Council has got started and has begun its mission. Mission is the Community Justice Collaborating Council exists to promote the safety of the citizens of St. Croix County and provide direction, leadership, and vision for an improved criminal justice system. With Mike O'Keefe as its coordinator, the CJCC has begun to tackle certain areas of concern within the county. Obviously, addiction and all its challenges will be front and center. Other areas being considered are mental health, domestic violence, community service, and others. The CJCC has 15 voting members and 4 advisory members. We are considering adding some additional members in order to be able to fully develop efficiencies within our justice system. The CJCC meets monthly on the 4th Thursday morning of each month, excepting July and December. The meetings last from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Any county board member is welcome to watch or participate. These meetings are open to the public. Contact Mike O'Keefe if you have any questions. And with that, let me introduce Mike O'Keefe. Some of you may remember Tom O'Keefe, who was a longtime county board member, our highway commissioner here in the county, et cetera. This is his son.
Thank you. Good morning. CJC is a relatively new concept in the state. At least half of the counties right now have a CJCC, functioning CJCC. What we're trying to do is to try to be a little bit smarter on crime rather than being tougher on crime. We do a lot of good things in St. Croix County, but I think we could do a lot of things more efficiently. And through the work of the CJCC, working with the courts and the judges, I think we're going to be able to make a lot of headway in keeping a lot of people diverted from the jail system, and that's a benefit for all of us. Again, it's a community justice program, so we would like to reach out to the total county, not just the criminal justice system in St. Croix County. I know I went to the county fair this year for the first time in about 20 years, and I had a lot of people ask me out there, they said, is this a Hudson project? I said, no, this is a county project. And I think we need to keep that on our front burner, that this represents all of the citizens of St. Croix County. So, thank you.
We judges wish to thank the county board, together with the county administrator, Pat Thompson, for your support in our budgets and our human services needs. We are all here to serve the public. Our mutual cooperation enables us to do so in a most efficient manner. Thank you all. Finally, our two court commissioners are here to give their reports. After doing so, we will entertain questions from board members. Stephen Dunlap is our family court commissioner and has been that since the year 2001. Tim Heckman is our full-time court commissioner. Tim has worked for us since the mid-1990s. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Judge. Members of the County Board. I am the court appointed. The judges appointed me as Family Court Commissioner, and they have reappointed me since 2001. Our former Family Court Commissioner was Judge Vlack, and when he was elected circuit judge, the judges asked me to take over the family court position. Family law is a little bit different than all the other areas in that once a family case is started, it goes to a final hearing. And then it changes from all the other law in that after the final hearing, it may say closed, but it's not closed. We have continuing problems with families, and that's where I come in. I take care of all the hearings before the final hearing, and then once the final hearing has been held, there are what we call post-judgment motions, post-judgment hearings, child support, placement. Last week was a particularly busy week because it's amazing when parents can't figure out where their children are going to school today. And I think my last hearing was a telephone conference Friday afternoon in which I had to decide where the child was going to go to school. I enjoy my work. When I took over from Judge Vlack, I wasn't up here all that often, and now I think I'm here almost every day. So it is a position that Commissioner Heckman is able to help me out with. He takes care of the, when parents are able to agree on a final judgment, final hearing, they put it into a form of an agreement, and Commissioner Heckman then has a hearing to approve that agreement. Unfortunately, for some reason, you know, pro se people, and it's not unfortunate, but pro se people are about 75% of family law work. And that is one area that I've worked on. We've developed procedures and hopefully a way to guide them through the family law process. I want to thank the county board for really its tremendous support for my office. Brenda Kearns is an unbelievable assistant for our office. She puts able to put Tim's schedule, my schedule, and meet with the pro se people as they come in. So I want to thank you for that.
I guess just briefly, I'm Tim Heckman, the court commissioner. This is what happens when you hit the gavel too many times. I'm essentially the pit roll mechanic. My job is to make those race cars look good and make sure the engines are running. So besides, like Steve said, I handle a couple hundred divorces every year. I handle all of the small claims Judge Judy type trials. I handle the traffic court. I handle most of the restraining orders, harassment, and domestic on the front end. And then back up the judges when they need assistance with criminal intake, juvenile court, probate, mental commitments, all that type of stuff as well. So kind of the backup, I have my own regular calendar and then just fill in the blanks, coordinate their legal research and writing needs with our part-time law clerk as well. So I'll be brief. I know you've got a busy day. I appreciate everybody's time, and my office is right upstairs with Steve, so if there's ever any questions, concerns, feel free to pop in, say hello, or contact me. But we do appreciate your support, specifically the enhancements to the hearing rooms, the increased safety has been very helpful. As Steve said, the majority of our litigants are pro se representing themselves, and Volatility is going to happen where you least expect it. Criminal court, mainly it's yes sir, no sir, yes judge, they want to get out of jail. Small claims, traffic, family, that's where you're going to see something happen. So those increased safety, security measures have been a great help, and we appreciate your support in that respect. So thank you very much, everybody.
I'll just take a couple of minutes. As Judge Lindell said, I wear two hats. First as a sitting circuit court judge, but also as the chief judge of the 10th Judicial District, which, for those of you not familiar, includes the 13 counties in northwest Wisconsin, from Eau Claire up to Douglas and Rusk across to St. Croix. 27 other circuit court judges fall under my administrative umbrella, and 13 county boards I deal with, county administrators, et cetera. On the statewide front, there is some good news. I believe Tabitha and Pat have learned that the January 15 circuit court support payments are being increased from where they have been the last number of years. The last number of years you've seen a 10% decrease virtually every year, but the Supreme Court has decided that that's not fair to counties, and so you will see an increase in your support grant for January of 15. July of 15, we're not sure, because that will start the new biennial legislative budget cycle, and the Supreme Court's not prepared to commit. The other thing that I thought I would just mention is that this is a little known fact, but as an equal branch of government, the courts receive less than 1% of every tax dollar that's raised. So of every tax dollar that's raised in this state, the court receives 85/100%. So 99.15% of all of your state tax dollars go to fund the legislative and the executive branch. How do we make up our funding? Primarily then through support from the counties, as well as through fees and surcharges and other things. Unfortunately, again, the county has taken on a significant increase in terms of their support of the courts. I believe in 2001, the counties were, it was about 47% of all court costs were covered by the county. As of this latest biennium, I think it's closer to 57%. And so we see this shift from the state to the counties. I can tell you that the Supreme Court continues to propose budgets that return more of the costs and fees and surcharges to the counties. Unfortunately, the legislature doesn't agree with that approach, and of all of the fees and costs and surcharges collected, about 24% come to the county, 70% go to the general fund, not to support the courts, but to support that other 99.15% of the state's budget. And so, again, it continues to be a challenge at the state level associated with funding, and in essence, to reinforce what everyone has said, we're extremely fortunate to be judges in this county because of the support that you've shown for what we do. If you have any questions about my role as a chief judge, certainly come up and talk to me. I maintain a full calendar here, and then somehow try to fit those other responsibilities in as I can. I'm very fortunate to have a full-time district court administrator who sits in Eau Claire, and she is kind of my feet on the ground, and I basically support her as opposed to she supporting me. Finally, because we have so many new county board members, we have what's called a judicial ride-along. If any of you would ever like to come up to the second floor and sit for a portion of a day or whatever the case may be with any of the judges, just let us know. We've had county board members do that in the past, and there's nothing like a good Child Support Enforcement Tuesday to sink your teeth into what we do and how we conduct our work. So with all seriousness, if you have an interest in sitting in and watching from our level, you sit right up on the bench with us, don't hesitate to contact one of our judicial assistants. We certainly would welcome that. Thank you.
Any questions about any of us?
I was going to ask, are there any questions from the supervisor? Yeah. Supervisor's office?
Judge Lindell, first of all, thank you. You and I had a short conversation last week down in the hall, and I appreciate that. You gentlemen always say if we've got questions, don't be afraid to ask, and I kind of took advantage of you walking down the hall, but I do appreciate that, and thank you. And I'd like to go back to looking at a fifth courtroom. Could you tell us, is there a point in time where the state would dictate to us? I know it's got to do with the workload that you gentlemen have, what that process is?
And I maybe can answer that better than Judge Lindell. Each year, the Committee of Chief Judges, which are the 10 chief judges from around the state, look at what's called our weighted caseloads. And that's a very complicated formula where we look at the number of cases, the types of cases, how much time it takes to process a particular case, and based on a computer programming component that I don't understand, it spits out a number as to how many judges you should have in a particular county to support those caseloads. Now, it's a moving target because our caseloads fluctuate. Thankfully, our civil cases are down because our foreclosures are down. But on the other side, our criminal cases are up this year, primarily, I think, in part because you've added a drug prosecutor, so our felony cases are up. So while each year we can tell you what those weighted caseloads are, we look at a 3-year average as a committee of chief judges because we think that's a better measure as opposed to targeting a year. To say what the magic number is, I can't. I can tell you that I believe, and don't quote me because this is one of 10 judges talking, that we are going to be proposing a new judgeship bill this coming fall to the legislature. And it will include 6 new judgeships throughout the state. St. Croix is not one of them because we didn't think that our caseloads would support another judgeship. But the last judgeship bill was in 2008, and prior to that was 1994. So those bills are sponsored by the Supreme Court or by the Committee of Chief Judges. We look obviously for legislative support, and we then propose judgeships in those counties with the highest judicial need. So to tell you when I think that's going to, when St. Croix will be in the mix, I can't, but if I were to guess, I would say certainly within the next 5 years, we will be looking at another potential judgeship bill, and I would be surprised if St. Croix's numbers hadn't, risen to that point, which for us becomes a tipping point. By example, Polk County right now has a 1.8 judicial need per judge. They have 2 judges. So you do the math, and they're short a judge right now. They probably will be included in the new judgeship bill. Dunn County has, I think theirs is 1.7 judicial needs. So again, you've got 1 judge doing the work of 1.7 judges in that county. They're probably going to be included in the bill. So that's kind of the formula we look at, and that's the best answer I can give you. St. Croix will not be in this upcoming judgeship bill. I know that for a fact, but if history is an indicator within the next 5 to 10 years, there will probably be another bill, and I would be surprised if St. Croix isn't in that mix at that time.
But we would not be in the mix.
And the process is 3 things have to occur. We need a resolution from the county board. You have to have the space. In other words, we will not propose a judgeship bill if you don't have the physical space. We ran into a problem with Monroe County 6 years ago. They were included in the judgeship bill. They promised to have adequate space. By the time that judgeship was added, they did not. And now 6 years later, I think they broke ground about 6 months ago. So that judge has been operating basically in a closet. They had to carve out space in the basement of the building, but we learned our lesson that we will only propose judgeships for counties that have the space as opposed to a promise to build.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Ask a quick question on the same topic. So how many judges in Chippewa County, Eau Claire County, and I think you mentioned Dunn, but I'm not sure you told how many judges are there?
Chippewa County has 3 judges. They were added to the 2008 bill that brought us Judge Cameron, so they just had a judgeship added in 2008. Eau Claire has 5 judges, but they also have a full-time court commissioner. And court commissioners get figured into the calculus as well because they do judicial work, and so we have to include them in terms of what is your available judge manpower. Dunn has 2, St. Croix has 4, Polk has 2, Douglas has 2, Barron has 3, and the rest of the counties are all single judgeships of the 13 that I supervise. And I just want to add, with regard to Supervisor Berkey's question, keep in mind that court commissioners are funded strictly by the counties. Judges our salaries are paid by the state, so we have this built-in conflict for counties that have court commissioners, because you're paying for those, and it's a savings to, for instance, Milwaukee County, and don't quote me, but I believe has 24 court commissioners. If Milwaukee County said tomorrow, we're not going to fund any court commissioners, Milwaukee's judicial need goes up 24 judges. They have 47 judges right now. But because we can include court commissioners in our calculation of judicial need, arguably counties who have court commissioners and support court commissioners get penalized because you're not getting judgeships, because you have county employees who are doing that work. Now, I'm not suggesting anything here, but for instance, in Polk County, I would be very surprised if they get a judgeship in this next bill that they don't drop their court commissioner, because that will be the trade-off for them.
Yes.
Judge Lindell, I'm curious, I haven't heard anything about the role of public defenders and whether or not you feel that their needs are being met, if they're able to provide adequate defense to those who have been accused of a crime in the state and, I'm sorry, in the county, and again, what their budget needs might be. I think they're all state sponsored, but are they concerned about the amount of compensation, the hourly rate, so that we can attract good public defenders?
I've heard that complaint before. That's true. Those public defenders who were hired back in the 1970s are six-figure employees. But those who have been hired since then are not. They're substantially under that. It was I don't know the formulas or whatever was used, but we have public defenders coming and going. It's true. In fact, one was announced the other day that she's moving to Rock County, I think it was. So Public Defender's Office covers 4 counties, Pierce, Dunn, and Polk County, as well as St. Croix County. And I think they have how many in the office, Judge Cameron? 10 attorneys. But yeah, there's some grumbling. There is. Any other questions?
Any other questions? No other questions? I'll say thank you very much to all the judges and the judicial people.
Thank you.
And I think we'll move to Administrator Pat Thompson and have an appointment. At this time,
Judge Lindell, did you want to stay for the next item on the agenda is the appointment. We're going to move that up a little bit in the agenda because we knew the judges would be here. During the judges' report, you heard the description, the background of the Community Justice Collaboration Council. That is a large group of members of the judicial, public safety, criminal justice system, and it is staffed by a full-time coordinator. At this time, I'd like to bring forward the appointment of Mike O'Keefe as the coordinator for the Community Justice Collaboration Council. As Judge Lindell described, Mike has been in the system for many, many years. He spent 32 years with the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. He was with the New Richmond Correctional Center for 9 years. As part of those 32 years, the Gordon Correctional Center for 11 years, and the Division of Probation and Parole. for 12 years. He also spent 1 year with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. He's had ongoing related training and education. He's been affiliated with the Exodus Halfway House, the St. Croix Valley Restorative Justice Program, the Barron County Restorative Justice Program, and the Washburn County Criminal Justice Committee. And Mike has only been with us for a few months now on the council, but I can't say enough good things about the work that he has done to bring forward proposals to the council, new ideas, innovative thinking. He's very well connected. He knows the system. He's worked in the system. He understands it, and he brings a lot of ideas to the council. An excellent appointment, and I would ask for the county board's support for this appointment. I don't know if Judge Lundell wants to say anything more, but
You said some wonderful things about Mike. I could go on forever talking about him, but he has saved our CJCC. We had a few rough moments a few months ago, but he has brought everybody together. His workday is extremely long. He comes to work a little after 7 in the morning, and I know he's been here as late as 7 in the evening. So he doesn't look at a clock. He doesn't go home right at 5. He's absolutely, totally qualified for this. And what maybe you failed to mention was he had been called the interim coordinator, and it led to some issues around the county. People thought, well, I'm not going to bother talking to him because he's going to be gone within a month. But that's why we forwarded the idea to the county board here that that we drop the interim, make him the full-time coordinator, and he's, what you didn't mention, I think he's paid half by a state grant and half by the county. And that will continue for the foreseeable future. So, any questions, feel free to ask. Mr. Thompson and myself, we are his supervisors. We daily supervise that situation, and but he's more or less his own department head. We can't quite figure out what to call it yet, but pretty close to that. So, but any other questions? Otherwise, I would encourage you to vote yes.
At this time, I'd look for a motion to approve the appointment of Michael Keefe. Motion by Supervisor Brinkman, second by Supervisor Keesler. Is there any discussion? Any questions? If no questions, we'll vote on that. And that was unanimous. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Administrator Thompson for the presentation and recognition of employee recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a couple of recognitions this morning. The first is a group of employees that have dedicated a lot of time and effort to health and wellness here in St. Croix County. It's the Health and Wellness Committee. It is made up of several staff people. I'll list off the staff people. Several of them are here this morning. Not all of them could be here. The committee is made up of Carrie Liu, Joe Besker, Jody Frick Formiller, Julie Nelson, Justin Townsend, Kelly Schrader, Chris Anderson, Lisa Gibson, Mary Huffland, Mike Trainer, Sue Lindberg, Tammy Funk, Teresa Kvam, Jeff Klatt, Terry Vold, Jody Malmgren, Jackie Montreal, and Missy Zopp. Some of the committee activities over the past year, they were instrumental in establishing the first Family Health Expo, the annual Employee Family Picnic. We've had 3 of them so far. This committee is instrumental in all the coordination and effort and work that goes into putting on the employee picnic. We had 2 board members there this year, Supervisor Hanson and our County Board Chair, Supervisor Larson. And we invite all board members, if you can, to try to fit that into your schedule. It's a lot of fun, and we can interact with a lot of employees. They were also involved with the first Employee Friend Family 5K. It seems like they're always sponsoring 5K events, 10K runs, and so if employees want to get fit and active and have some fun, this is the committee that will probably be involved in planning it. It's a great group. They have sponsored brown bag seminars, weight loss challenges. A while ago, they had a quit tobacco challenge for employees, miscellaneous social opportunities like bowling, which I hear is pretty good exercise. They've sponsored events to the St. Paul Saints games, even Twins games. I keep telling them we got to go to Brewer games and Packer games, but I think they're working on that. Ongoing employee education, and they are also involved with some of the health insurance in terms of wellness reimbursement programs to include dependents and expanded scope. A big part of our health insurance is prevention and wellness, and we try to promote that through fun activities with the workforce. And I think as you review the 2015 budget, when we go through our health insurance renewal, you will see some of the benefits of a healthy workforce in terms of our renewal for premium costs and health insurance, which is a big part of our budget. But it's one area where we can, try to control some of those costs. So, and this committee has done it, and they've done it in a big way. And I think we need to reward and recognize their activities. So, those employees that I have confirmed here attending, and those that are not here will get their certificates. And if I don't call off your name and you are here, let me know. The first committee member is Bob Heisey. The second committee member is Colleen Crone. Tammy Funk. Liza Gibson. Julie Nelson. Jody Frick Formiller. Oh, she had to go back in, okay. Mary Hoffland. Hi, Mary. Thanks. Is anyone here from the Wellness Committee that I did not call? Okay, Teresa and Mike. Pardon? Let's see. Okay. Mike? And Teresa. Thanks, Teresa. Anyone else? All right, let's give them a round of applause. So thank you very much to the entire committee. We treated them with pizza last week, so it was kind of like a little bit of an oxymoron here. I thought, well, I wanted to treat the committee. I said, what could we do? And they all said pizza, so we did pizza. But it was a lot of fun, and it was healthy pizza, and there was also salad provided, and so
It was very well balanced. The next recognition is for one of our outstanding citizens of St. Croix County. His name is Leon Barenschott. Leon, if you could stand, please. Leon was a former county board member. He served on the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors from 1996 through 2004. During this term, he also served on the Health and Human Services Board, where he was vice chair from 2000 to 2004. Leon also served on the Personnel Committee as vice chair from 2002 to 2004. From 1997 through 2004, Leon served on the Resource and Education Board, serving as vice chair from 1999 through 2004. Leon stayed busy as the vice chair of the Land and Water Conservation Board in 1997, but stayed on the committee as a committee member until 2004. He continued as a board member on the Fair Board from 1999 through 2007. Afterwards, Leon, after he left the county board, he didn't find a lazy boy chair by any means. He remained very active in St. Croix County by serving as a citizen member from 2006 to 2014 on the Health and Human Services Board, as well as a citizen member of the West Central Regional Planning Commission. And I don't know if there's a committee or board or commission that Leon did not help out with here at St. Croix County over many, many years. And then when he left the board formally, he still was involved up until the very last month at Health and Human Services, where he at least surprised me by the announcement of his retirement. So on behalf of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors and all the citizens of St. Croix County, I'd like to personally thank Leon Barenschott for his many, many years of service and dedication and loyalty to St. Croix County. Thank you.
Well, many of the supervisors here I don't know, but I can remember back when I was first on the county board. The Vern Berkey was chairman of the board, and he asked me at the time, he said, what kind of committees would you like to be on? And of course, I think he was being a friend because we graduated together up in Amory. And he said, and I said, well, first of all, I guess I'd like to be on the Health and Human Services. I said, I think I can help people in the county more there than I can anywhere else. However, I didn't know how much money they were spending over there to get the Health and Human Services. This is a big part of the county, and this was a lot of work. I just can remember some of the things we went through, and I'm not going to dwell on any of the things we went through in the Health and Human Services, but anyone that's on the Health and Human Service Board certainly will admire the work that they're going to do there, because it is fantastic. It is big business, very big. Anybody that don't understand it won't understand it until you've been on the board. But anyway, I want to thank St. Croix County, because I kind of like St. Croix County, because I guess I was always thinking about St. Croix County when I was born and raised in Polk County. Anyway, thank you again. Thank you again for this here.
Thank you, Leon. The next group of employees are from the Register of Deeds Department. Back on August 12th of this year, something pretty important happened in the Government Center, and probably a lot of you aren't aware of it, but we're going to make you aware of it this morning. On August 12th, the Register of Deeds recorded their 1 millionth document in the office. It was a mortgage that came through. We were all on alert that
you know, the millionth document was gonna be coming through, and I think I ran down the hall a couple times to see if it had come through towards the end of the day, and it hadn't. I don't know if it came through late in the day, but I think it was probably a little bit later in the day. We're recognizing the entire department for this momentous and historic achievement of recording that document. The first known, a couple fun facts here. The first known real estate document in St. Croix County was recorded on September 14th, 1848, in a handwritten book with a quill pen. It was for the sale of a 53-acre parcel just south of Lake Malibu for the price of $67.18. 53-acre parcel. This same property is now the site of hundreds of parcels in the city of Hudson valued at over $42 million. In the 166 years since that very first document was recorded in St. Croix County, a lot of changes have occurred in the Register of Deeds office. The office now records approximately 28% of the real estate documents electronically, and almost all documents are digitized and available through the internet. In addition to land-related documents, the Register of Deeds office handles vital records such as military service discharges, birth, death, marriage records. Register of Deeds office is able to tell the vital story of who, what, and when for people's lives and property. The office is headed by Beth Pabst, right here. She has been Register of Deeds and has worked in this office for 22 years. She takes pride in the fact that her office staff is constantly being thanked for excellent customer service and the pleasant and cheerful way in which this office serves our residents and businesses. Beth describes her office coworkers with one word: awesome. And they are awesome. The staff here is Sandy Hansen. Sandy has been in the office for 6 years. Amy Sabelko, there's Amy, she's been in the office 5 years. Rachel Trudell has been in the office 1 year. And our newest member of the office, Kristen Granberg, has been there coming up on 1 year. So we're very fortunate to have Beth Pabst as Register of Deeds leading this office. I think when we say customer service is one of our goals as a county, Beth walks the talk, and she makes sure that not only does she believe in customer service, but also her staff. So I'd like to turn it over to Beth and have her say a few words.
Thanks, Chair Larson and County Board for St. Croix County. You know, Pat thanked me for my service in the customer service here, but I just want to let you know that the recognition actually belongs to these 4 gals here. I'm honored and thankful every day to work with each one of the girls standing here. Sandy Hansen has an incredible memory. She remembers all the statutes, all the administrative rules, everything. I have this little notebook, and I just keep looking it up. Sandy keeps it all upstairs here. Amy Sabelko, she does mostly vital records for us. She's extremely conscientious, just, you know, very heartfelt, works wonderfully with all the funeral directors, the hospitals, people coming in that need changes to their vital records, marriage records, all the officiants out there. Rachel Trudell comes from the title industry and the banking industry. She is like extremely good with you know, with computer programs, things like that, which is kind of handy being that we work with about like 6 or 7 of them. And then the newest member here, Kristen Granberg, has a little bit of surveying background. Her husband Joe out here is a surveyor, so she's worked with him. So she's got a little bit of that extra knowledge, kind of fits that final piece to the puzzle that we were lacking to kind of give us a little bit of that surveying and kind of that other little piece out there. You know, here stands the talent that makes the Register of Deeds office operate so efficiently. These gals, they're the boots on the ground. They're the faces at the counter that you guys see when you come in and all our customers see. They're that voice that everybody is hearing on the phone. It's the recognition that actually belongs to them. Thank you very much.
So Beth, I'd like to acknowledge your work as Register of Deeds with their certificate. Rachel, Sandy, Kristen, and Amy.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again, everyone. Good job.
Thank you for that, Pat. I think what we'll do is we'll go into the administrator report for the financial reports, and then we'll probably take a break after that.
Okay, just a quick report. I'll let Tabitha Hanson handle any specific financial questions you have regarding the monthly financials that were included in the packet. Would also like to just comment on a few items. One is that we're in the process of working through the 2015 budget requests. The finance director, Tabitha Hanson, and myself have met with all the elected officials and department heads and key budget staff to review their original submittals, their original budget requests. We've met with each of them, heard their explanations for both their requested expenditures and projected revenues for the department. We're in the process of going through that. The finance department is reviewing the requests and making sure everything is coded right. And but without throwing a number out, I'm fairly certain that we are faced with a gap between expenditures and revenues that is going to require a bit of work from the finance department staff and myself, and ultimately the standing committees of the board. Once you hear the budget requests and the committee of the whole, and in November, which is right around the corner, by the full county board. The budget that I present to the board will be balanced with revenues and expenditures, but it's fair to say at this point, based on the preliminary numbers that have come in, we have a gap. So we will fine tune that by the time the standing committees of the board review those departments' budgets, and they come in front of the administration committee in September and the committee of the whole in October. Those budgets will be fine-tuned and hopefully in balance with recommendations, but it will require some tough decisions, both on the expenditure side and revenue side for the budget. But I've been through this before, and so has Tabitha. I'm confident that we will able to do this, and we will be able to ultimately have a fair and balanced budget by the time we approve it in November. Another area of interest for the board is that the Health and Human Services board created a subcommittee to look at the healthcare center building project, and that subcommittee has been busy reviewing proposals for architectural and engineering firms. We did send out an RFP. We had 9 companies respond to the RFP. The subcommittee met last week, poured through the proposals, and I believe, if I'm correct, we ultimately narrowed the 9 proposals down to approximately 6 companies, with the hope and goal that once we go through the financials and the costs that were proposed by each firm and clarify some of those cost items in the proposals, our hope and intent is to interview 4 companies for architectural and engineering firms. We did narrow the 9 down to 6, but I think it was the committee's preference, and mine included, that we try to maybe narrow that down to even 4 if we can. But that'll be up to the subcommittee, which is made up of some key staff people, along with Supervisor Paulette Anderson, Shayla Liebfried, and pardon? Deb Rasmussen, yes. Deb is a citizen member of the Health and Human Services Board, registered nurse, I believe. So she's also on the subcommittee. We also have county board supervisors that are sitting in as an advisory capacity. Supervisor Hanson, Supervisor Achterhoff, I believe I'm thinking of the different subcommittee. Schoberg, yes. So it's a busy committee, a lot of good work being done. I think we have interviews set up for next week. Later on in the agenda, we have 2 agenda items that are of key importance, I think, to St. Croix County moving forward into the future, and that is the review of the Human Resources Policies and Procedures Handbook, and also the resolution on governance, which is before you today, a month sooner than what had originally been anticipated. I think collectively, both of these resolutions are solid. Both of the work and the diligence and the homework and the analysis that has gone into both resolutions is strong. The subcommittee of the Staff Advisory Committee that has been working on the Human Resources Policies and Procedures Handbook ought to be commended. Supervisor Achterhoff and Schoberg, key members of the Staff Advisory Subcommittee, which poured through page by page, line by line, sentence by sentence, the HR handbook. And what you have before you today is the product of a lot of work and effort and review. Is it 100% perfect? I'd love to say yes, but I think it's darn close, if not. But I think it's a living, breathing document that even calls for an annual review. And so as we plod through and as we move through the next 6 months, 12 months, there will be some areas of the handbook that we will feel need to be revisited at a future date, in a year. And that's okay, because that's what should be done for any policy and procedure handbook like this. But it addresses virtually almost every aspect of county government. It's a balanced document which balances the governance issue between policy, direction, and leadership from the County Board of Supervisors and the administration and management of the county through the county administrator and staff. I believe it is balanced, it is appropriate, and I support it for all the work that has been done. It dovetails into the governance discussion. This board, I think wisely, after your April election, decided to review the governance of St. Croix County. This model was fairly new. It's only 3 years old, the current model that we're operating under. I think it was smart that the new board coming in with as many members as we had to come in and ask some very tough questions and to ask, is this the right form of governance going forward into the future for St. Croix County? I think a lot of good questions were asked, a lot of analysis, and a lot of due diligence, and I think that the recommendation that's coming forward from the administration committee is a solid one. I think that it was appropriate that we went through this process. I think when NASA builds a ship and it goes on a long mission and comes back, it doesn't assume that everything is fine and dandy. It reviews every key aspect of that mission. And if there's any tweaks or any improvements that they can make to that ship, they do it. And I think that's what this board has done. You've looked at the current model, you've tweaked it through the HR handbook, and we will also revisit that again through our rules and bylaws. And I think that the final product is one that this board can get behind, and certainly myself as administrator and key staff will get behind it and we'll make it work. So I wanted to say that prior to the action that you take on the board. I probably won't say much during the discussion on those two items unless you have questions, which I would be more than happy to address. And lastly, the Health and Human Services Board, because of Mr. Barenschot's retirement, has a citizen vacancy on the Health and Human Services Board. Those citizen appointments are very important. Deb Rasmussen, Dr. Ramsey, and Leon Barenschot have been instrumental in the discussion and debate and decisions made by the Health and Human Services Board. It's important that we have strong citizen participation in our boards and commissions. And so it's, you've left big shoes to fill, Leon. We are in the process of recruiting or advertising for that opening. It's open until September 12th. I've asked citizens that are interested in serving to submit a brief letter of interest. And at that point then, the chair of the Health and Human Services Board and myself, possibly Fred Johnson, possibly Supervisor Larson, will sit down and review those applicants and make a recommendation to the county board, possibly in October. Supervisor Babbitt is the chair of Health and Human Services Board, and he and I have reviewed the process that we're following to fill that. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Unless there's questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Is there any questions from the supervisors? If there are none, okay. Let's take a short break, maybe 10 minutes, be back. Thank you, everyone. Our next order of business is an ordinance adopting amended zoning district maps for 17 of the 21 St. Croix County, Wisconsin towns. And I'm looking for a motion. And Supervisor Ring has the motion. Do I have a second to that? Supervisor Hanson has a second. I have a motion and a second. And I'll turn it back to Supervisor Ring to give us an update on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Larson. So in your packet was included the ordinance adopting the amended zoning district maps for 17 of the 21 St. Croix County towns. I think the work that you see there reflects a long and deliberate process that actually started a few years ago. I think land use decisions are very important to landowners, as I think everyone here knows. And what this affects is the property owners in the rural areas of the county. So there are 17, so let me just start with just an overview of the process. When I say it was a long and deliberative process, actually it started a few years ago when we did there was a comprehensive land use plan. There was a farmland preservation plan. And those plans outlined what the existing land use. They looked at what land, there's a scientific review to say what land is appropriate for what uses. And then, so those plans were adopted. Now also the state, in the meantime, set new statutes regarding farmland preservation planning, so that came in the mix. They had new standards. So when the county, a year ago, as a culmination of this process, it was in October, there was a plan that, or the zoning amendment was adopted. Now that step in the process took care of just the text, the narrative. So we had, I think, a zoning, our ordinance was approximately 40 years old. So there was a lot of updating. There was a review with other counties and best practices. There was lots of conversation across the state of how to change and modernize this new zoning district. So your zoning map, your zoning in any county is it's the enforcement, or it's the implementation piece. It's the end result of your planning process. It should guide our decisions here. So what it says, so we have the comprehensive plan, which includes the farmland preservation planning districts. So that language last year was adopted, and it set in motion the process to amend the maps of our zoning district maps. So again, every zoning ordinance has two pieces, a narrative and a map. The comprehensive revision process is a process that where it's a time where all the local units of government and in county zoning can make a few decisions. One is, should they stay in zoning? Should they do something else? Not have zoning, I mean, that option exists as well. And then what districts, what properties will they include in what districts? Again, going back to the districts that were created a year ago. So as a result, the bottom line is we had 17, let's see, there was 18 towns. Let's see, what do we have? 17 towns that are all listed in your packet: Baldwin, Silent, Ogallie, Emerald, Erin Prairie, Glenwood, Hammond, Kinnickinnick, Pleasant Valley, Richmond, Rush River, St. Joseph, Somerset, Springfield, and Stanton. All of those decided, one, to stay in zoning and participated in a very collaborative process with county staff to establish those, to establish the districts. Now, there are 4 other towns in the county. Forest, in the last maybe 18 months, decided to have its own zoning. Troy, just a couple months ago, decided to have its own zoning just very recently. Hudson Town has had its own zoning, administering its own zoning ordinance for a long time. It's not part of county zoning. We have one unzoned town, and that's Katy. So, in this process, there were lots and lots of meetings. Our community development director talked about when the comprehensive revision was set in motion. There were, with 17 towns, there were lots of meetings that our staff attended, more than 50 meetings. Some of those meetings, some of those townships, they went back to repeatedly. And, because it's a difficult process. And I would like to give credit also to all the towns who worked very hard in their communities to engage the public. I went to several of these meetings where the towns talked about, okay, here's the deal, what do we want to do? And to me, it's about it's a grassroots process, a very grassroots process. And it's, what I like about it, I think the approach was, it's art and science, but I think there was a lot of science involved. There was the art of working with each of those towns. When it came down to we had a public hearing on this. There were some amendments along the way. The towns, in every case, we worked with the towns and then got recommendations from the towns for those land, for how the land would be zoned. And the end result is the zoning ordinance. Now, our zoning ordinance, why it's so important, our zoning ordinance has to reflect the land use plan. Basically, we can't change a zone. We have to have a basis. And we get rezoning requests. You will find those coming in regularly. And if we need a basis to say, oh, that rezoning, that looks like it worked, because you'll find there's probably about 25 things that we look at. And one is compliance. Does it fit with the long-term future land use map? And it's not that we can't make that change, but if the land use plan or farmland preservation plan indicates something else, then it's kind of back to the drawing board. If first you amend the plan, then you can amend the zone. And that's a good interactive process. Let's see. So end result is we have about 75 or about 25% of the land in these 17 towns was zoned agricultural 1 or 2. About 70% is what's called rural residential. We changed that name, it's ag residential. Because the agricultural land takes up so much of the land in the rural area, that was, when we did the comprehensive revision, the first step, this one-year-long process, was really studying and bearing down on the agricultural land uses. The next step that in this process, and again, this is not an event, it is a process. The next step in this process is that we have to look at that rural residential district. Once again, starting in the next month or so, we'll begin working with the towns again to review the narrative portion of that rural residential district. What should that look like? Right now, it's very limited. It's kind of a catch-all. What is likely to happen is that there would be more than one district. I've heard talks of maybe it's 3 districts or 5. So it's not in a growing county like ours. The reason we'd look at that is not one size fits all. What works on the eastern side might not be enough on a fast-growing, more western side. So that, just to look forward, that is the next part of the process. I'd like to, at these meetings, I would like to say I saw firsthand how the staff worked so closely with these town residents. Sometimes this is controversial stuff. It's hard. It's difficult to understand what the implications might be. So I think our staff just went over and above in, reaching out and making this a collaborative process. And that reflects on St. Croix County. What our people are out there doing. How they do it is really important. So the person in charge as Community Development Director is Ellen Denzer. She led the project. Amanda and Angus Sether, a senior planner, I'd like to also just was the project manager of this. But there was just lots of support, and I'd like to name those staff members who contributed. There's more that contributed at the office, but I think these were the night meetings. At the public hearing, one of the town's board members came up and just was effusive in his praise to Ellen and her staff for thanking her for coming out so many times till we got it right. So Brett Boudreau, Kevin Graybow, Pam Quinn, Dan Sitz, Ryan Yarrington, Alex Blackburn, and William Blake for the GIS support. That and on the whole office staff, I just would like to make sure I thank them. So with that, I would like to, that's my overview, and I would entertain questions. And Chair, I think I would, if the board members would like a more technical review, either of the process or the outcomes, our staff is ready, willing, and able to do that.
Okay. Yes.
Before the board debates the ordinance and approves or acts on it, just a technical note that you may see in your packet that there were no signatures, electronic signatures of approval for review by legal, financial, and administration. All those reviews have taken place. This was on a 2-month agenda cycle, and it was when it went through the second time in through the system, it didn't pick up the electronic signatures of Corporation Counsel, Finance, and myself. But rest assured, the ordinance as drafted has received those reviews, and all 3 have signed off.
I have that here.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any of the supervisors? Or would you like a Supervisor Schotner?
I just have a question on change in participation. How many, so 4 towns are not participating in county zoning. How many were not participating before this? And 3? Okay.
Supervisor Berkey.
So I was interested to know, with respect to the town of Katy, what ramifications does it have that a town has no zoning? And is that in process to change?
The town of Katy always has the opportunity, or any town has the opportunity, to be under county zoning at their choice. They would pass a resolution by the town board to be in county zoning. They also have the option to have no zoning. Town of Katy has never had any zoning, but they have been looking at doing their own zoning ordinance, and we actually had provided comments and input on that, as we do for all towns that are interested in doing their own zoning. About 2 years ago, they submitted a draft ordinance to us, and we provided extensive comments. I believe after that, they started having a lot of internal discussions with various residents on the pros and cons of that, and I believe they are still resolving some of those types of changes that their residents might have, and they may be coming back, either looking at county zoning or more likely looking at their own zoning. One thing we do intend to do is to follow up with them and provide them with, we've always provided them with everything we provided all along to all the other towns, including the towns that had their own zoning. All of our information went out to the town of Forest and town of Hudson, because if they had preferred, they certainly could have decided to change and come under county zoning. But we do intend to follow up with Katie and give them the opportunity to see what kind of changes we've made, and so that they would have a better understanding if they intend to be in or have agricultural districts, or perhaps consider county zoning. But there are no negative ramifications. They have that right. It doesn't hurt them in any way regarding financing or anything like that.
Are there any other questions? Supervisor Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair Larson. I have a question. As I look at each of these township maps, it looks like the zoning districts are in 7 categories. I'd like to see the definition of those 7 categories.
Those categories are in the narrative, and that's online on your county webpage under the county zoning tab, the zoning ordinance tab, and we can certainly get you paper copies if that's what you'd prefer. Those districts vary quite a bit in terms of agriculture. We could have Amanda come up and talk about our 2 new districts a little more detail if you'd like. Our rural residential district, the narrative is the same as it has always been. We simply changed the name from ag residential to rural residential in anticipation of our next process. And our commercial district and industrial districts have not changed from what they were, and neither has our conservancy district. But the other districts, the Ag 1 and Ag 2, were updated to meet state statute and to allow for agriculture-related uses, agricultural accessory uses, and also changes in agriculture uses, and they're pretty close to state statute. Would you like paper, or would you like us to go over it today, or?
I would like to hear a brief definition of each one. When I look, for example, right now, I think I'm looking at Town of Baldwin, mostly dark green, which would be Ag 1. If I look at the town of Warren, it's mostly yellow, which is rural residential. So those 2 must be somewhat interchangeable?
No, they're not anymore. The reason that they're different is a great deal has to do with the philosophy of their town plans and the philosophy of their town boards and what direction they want to go. Our farmland preservation plan, as required by state statute, covered agricultural areas for every community, okay, every town. And then what we had to do was go back, because the new law, the new state statute, also requires us to incorporate municipal plans. So for instance, an example would be the town of Richmond, that even though it has extensive agriculture in its community, identified that going forward, they see the future of their town as mostly rural residential, okay? Now, that doesn't mean agriculture won't be in the town for many years to come. It's simply how they chose to do their comprehensive planning for the future land uses in their town. In the town of Warren, there was a mixed use. But at the same time, the town of Warren has always felt that, because even in the previous, they did not have either of our 2 ag districts in their zoning mix in their town. And going forward, they chose to only have a couple of parcels where there was a very strong interest from their residents in either Ag 1 or Ag 2. They chose to have the majority of their town remain in rural residential, ag residential. Part of that is the newness of the districts and the fact that in the past they did not have any ag districts in their town. Part of it is the feeling that they'd like to kind of take a wait-and-see approach and see what those districts kind of pan out to mean, and then perhaps make changes as they move forward. some of the towns have always felt that they feel the market should decide what happens with agriculture. They don't want to see farmers in a zoning district where they have to zone out to sell land, okay, rezone their property. They want the market to decide and keep it very open. And that's the way it was in the town of Hammond, town of Warren, that kind of situation. And that philosophy has continued as they move forward. We actually, the towns that did not have any ag zoning, most of them chose either not to have any going forward or to have just a little bit and then sort of see how the process goes forward.
Yes, Supervisor Nielsen.
Thank you. I don't want to slow us down. You all have worked so hard and done such good work here. It seems to me those definitions should be in the ordinance because the definition on the webpage can change and they should not change the ordinance. They should be static at the time of the ordinance being passed. Let me ask you this. Are the definitions determined by the state of Wisconsin or were they determined locally?
The definitions were determined by this board, and the definitions on the webpage cannot change. We have a process in place where only if this board amends an ordinance can we make any changes, and we actually have a system of checks and balances in place between myself, Kathy Spott, Cindy Campbell, that no updates or changes are made on the website unless all three of us send it through the process.
Great, thank you.
Supervisor Ring.
And so that's the definitions or the narrative I referred to, that if we wanted to do it now, we could. At the October 2013 meeting of the county board, there's a lot of background, and that's where there's a summary, there's a PowerPoint of what the thinking was, and then the definitions are there.
All the language and all the definitions were adopted in October 1 of 2013 by this board. Yes.
Are there any other questions or want any more information? Supervisor Stroberg.
Just a question, Ms. Denzer. The use of high-capacity water wells, is that part of one ag zoning and not part of another? Or how does that have any play on zoning at all, or is that some other aspect?
That does not have any, we do not have jurisdiction. St. Croix County does not have any jurisdiction over high-capacity wells. Only the DNR has jurisdiction over those. Excuse me, we do generally try to keep track by checking the DNR web database on wells, but we do not have any jurisdiction to approve or deny, or at this point, our regulations do not influence, except from the fact that if you're in an agricultural district, then you would, and you were investing in agriculture in terms of high-capacity wells, tiling, irrigation systems, et cetera, that you would be more assured of being able to get the payback on your investment as an agricultural producer.
Just a follow-up on that. Do you think the county should have a say on the number of high-capacity wells that should be within our county?
I think there is a growing concern, and I think that there are definite impacts to that. I think that it would be something that we should talk about as to whether or not the county should have a say. I think you always would have the right and opportunity to influence the legislature. I don't know that we could add a layer of regulation. I don't know if that's legally an option. Okay, I'm getting no from our corporation counsel, but certainly
it's not legally possible. Other counties have tried to encourage the legislature to make it a power of counties.
Okay, and I think that would be your role at this time, and if you're looking at the impacts, we definitely have started in our office and in our Land and Water Conservation Division to see a great deal of concern and questions by residents, because there is definitely that there are impacts.
Any other questions?
So I just want to make clear, the staff does have a 10-minute presentation if it's the pleasure of the board to have more detail.
There is a presentation available if you want to look at something else. If you don't, we can vote on it. It's up to the board. I don't see anybody raising a finger, so I guess at this time there's no more discussion. We're going to vote on it, so. And it was unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to the next. And we have a resolution to support regulation of e-cigarettes. And Supervisor Babbitt, do you want to explain that?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Health and Human Services took a look at this issue fairly extensively in our last meeting. We had a very good presentation from the Western Wisconsin Working for Tobacco-Free Living Coalition, which obviously St. Croix County is a part of. I am a non-smoker, and so I was surprised to learn as much as we did during the presentation to HHS about the extent to which e-cigarettes have proliferated in this country and have already become a very significant industry. There seems little doubt that the makers of e-cigarettes are already trying to pull in the younger population through their advertising and marketing campaigns that are very clearly geared toward this population. And given that St. Croix County's taken a stand on tobacco-free issues in the past, and given the fact that data is beginning to emerge about the harmful side effects of e-cigarettes, we felt it was important that the county board take a stand on this issue and share that stand with the state. There have been some concerns that the state is considering exempting e-cigarettes from Clean Indoor Air Act legislation, which is obviously a significant concern for us. So as HHS board, we wanted to forward this on to the full board for consideration for those reasons. I know Fred Johnson is here. I don't know whether we have an individual from the coalition here today to talk with us. If we don't, I think that's okay. We can certainly provide information to individual board members should they so desire. But HHS felt very strongly that we as a county board should take a position on this issue, and thus the issuance of the resolution. Thank you.
At this time, I'd be open for a motion to approve it.
I would certainly make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
And I need a second to that. Supervisor Anderson. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Any questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no further questions, then we'll vote on this. So if everybody's ready to vote. One abstained, 17 yeses. Thank you. 16.
You don't have to give a reason.
What?
You don't have to give a reason.
Okay. Did you say yes? Give a reason? No, that's what I said. So thank you. We'll move on to the next part on our agenda, the resolution to support local control and health impact assessment on frac sand mining. And I would take a motion on that before it hits the floor. Supervisor Babbitt has the motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. And Supervisor Faulkner seconded. We go into discussion. Yes, Supervisor Babbitt.
Maybe just briefly, Mr. Chairman, again, I appreciate the board's consideration of this resolution. On HHS board, and I believe in front of the full board as well, we have had discussions at various times in the last few months about frac sand mining and the situation that is emerging outside of Glenwood City. Most of you know, if not all of you, that the HHS board made a recommendation to the Glenwood City Council a little while ago that they delay their decision-making regarding the annexation of the land adjacent to Glenwood City where the frac sand mining operation is located. Glenwood City chose not to do that and went ahead and annexed that land, which effectively negated the extent to which St. Croix County can exercise some measure of control over the frac sand mining operation. That process, along with what we believe as HHS Board has been a concerted effort on the part of the state to remove local control over any number of issues, including frac sand mining, led to the proposal of this resolution. St. Croix County would join a number of other counties in the state who are concerned about similar issues. And as many of you know, the Vista Sand situation has recently been significantly complicated by the information which emerged shortly ago that their CEO has been in prison for about 2 months now, since June, for offenses which we don't need to discuss here. I think it's fair to say that Glenwood is going through a significant amount of turmoil right now about this issue. It's my understanding that families who can manage to open enroll their children are moving out of the Glenwood City schools into neighboring school districts, at least in part because of the arrival of the frac sand mining operation and Glenwood City's decision to annex them into the city. So HHS Board felt once again it would be important for the St. Croix County Board to go on record as supporting local control over issues such as frac sand mining, and to tie with that to our concerns about the health impacts of this frac sand issue. Mr. Johnson, I would also invite you, if you would like to come forward and talk a little bit about this process. Fred Johnson's been very involved in talking with some of the counties who've been forwarding similar resolutions, and I thank you for coming forward, Fred, and sharing a little bit with us.
I would just add a couple of other details. We were forwarded a resolution from Grant County that talked about removal of local control. I think that was mimicked after Eau Claire County. In addition, the Health and Human Services Board also looked at the Department of Natural Resources ambient air monitoring plan and authorized a submittal of some concerns about the lack of monitoring crystalline silica, which is the cancer-causing agent that is of concern with regard to frac sand mining, that there are no sites for monitoring in St. Croix County, and there's nothing that we could see in the plan that was monitoring sites close to schools. I think those are the 3 highlighted areas. So as Dr. Babbitt, the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, Board has indicated, this has been a topic of review for the last, I think it's been a routine agenda item and resulted in the resolution that you have in front of you today.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate that.
Supervisor Peterson.
When you say advocating local control, could you clarify local control? Would that be meaning at the county level or at the individual towns and village control?
Supervisor Peterson, my understanding is that it's both. That essentially what's been happening on several different issues over the last few years has been that Madison appears to be trying to essentially take control away from municipalities and counties and essentially exert that control themselves. So I believe it is both towns, municipalities, counties, and other organizations.
I guess my concern on thinking about that is if we don't do it at the county level, then we could have a situation just as going on in Glenwood City now, or Katy, that you know, we're going to have all these divisions in the county, whereas in my humble opinion, the county level, we would have more means to investigate this. And along that, just a side note, I recall it was about 2 years ago, I think now, that the Board of Adjustment did have a professor from UW-Wisconsin come in and address us. And there was the gal retired last year, but she was from Health and Human Services, was also present at that. And just to paraphrase, don't hold me to it line for line, but my understanding was on the silicate that the professor was essentially telling us that for that silicate to be released from the sand, it would have to be such as a sand blasting operation. And even if that was the case, if it was in a booth or whatever, more than 4 feet away, it would be at insignificant levels. But that's just a recollection.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Supervisor Peterson. I think what HHS Board was trying to do was to recognize that the information is beginning to come forward about these issues, but is by no means complete. And it was one of the reasons why we sent a letter essentially to DNR asking them to provide as much information as they could to us, and there is some evidence to suggest that that's beginning to happen. But there's no question. I think there are additional questions that we'd like to have answered, and I still wish, of course, that Glenwood had slowed down a little bit and allowed us to do a little bit more due diligence at the county level.
Supervisor Marknoff?
I'm not going to say I'm pro or anti the frac sand mine, but Glenwood, the county didn't get involved until Glenwood City had been involved for several years. And this is one of the main reasons, I believe, that they turned down the 90-day extension, because they did extend it for various different people and for reasons. And then all of a sudden it seemed to Glenwood City, this is my own personal interpretation from what's happened and from talking to people and whatnot, that the county all of a sudden decided it was time to jump in, and this was after Glenwood City had been through so much. They just wanted to get it done because it kept getting procrastinating about. And like I say, I'm not pro or anti. I'm not going to take a stand because I represent both sides in my community, but just a better explanation of why they turned it down.
Supervisor Nielsen?
Thank you, Chair Larson. Yeah, sand mining in Wisconsin is not new. There's been silica sand mined. Certainly, I'm not sure if it's Pepper and Pierce County down by Maiden Rock. It's been for many, many years they've been taking sand out of there for glass making. And I agree with Judy. We're coming in as a county belatedly to make our statement. And regardless of how you vote on this, it's just symbolic. There's no significance to what we're doing here today. So I'll probably abstain from the vote. But frac sand mining is so huge, and I don't know if there are 10 counties in Wisconsin or 20 counties that have or have proposed frac sand mines. I don't want each county to have their own health impact assessment. I'm all for local control, but I don't think we want to have any different health impact assessments on frac sand mining. So for that reason, I tend to be kind of against this resolution.
Supervisor Berkey?
If I might ask a question, and maybe this is something we can do at a future meeting after the fall election. My concern about this has more to do with the bigger issue of losing local control, whether it's a municipality or the county. And I think that in order for us to be more proactive as a county government, and those of us obviously are from municipalities and represent various municipalities, would it not be a tactic, if you will, that at a future meeting after the fall elections to invite those legislators from Madison that represent us, all of the 3 legislative districts and the senator, to have an open discussion at a county board meeting talking about this very core issue of control. It's a huge issue, whether it has to do with this frac sand mining matter or something else in the future. I bring that up to the chair and to the other board members as a possibility. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Schottner?
I am all for the study for the Health and Human Services and for the study of the impact study. But I look at the local control part as an issue as part of regional planning, where St. Croix County has been able to, because of our more stringent regulations in the county on frac sand mining, we've been able to dodge much of the the growth of the industry. On regional planning, though, it has been the #1 issue for a very long time, because the impact of, it's not just the impact of the mines, it's the impact of the mines on the infrastructure. And they're seeing that with the lack of local control that they have, there is no discussions when the mines go in about how much weight is going to be put on the infrastructure and who's going to pick up the tab for the repairs. I know that there is a proposed mine in Polk County right now. I just heard a discussion about it. And the mine's impact overall will be, there will be a truckload of sand. When the mine is fully operational, there will be a truckload of sand or an empty truck going through Taylor's Falls every 3 minutes throughout the day. And there's no talk of the infrastructure impact of it. And there's, on the county roads, on the state roads, or anything else, all they get is, we think everything will be okay. But with the continuous cuts to the transportation dollars and the levy limits making it so we can't repair the roads as much, that local control becomes more vital in ensuring that the communities can actually meet their needs, because the companies aren't the ones that are paying for the damage to the roads in the end. It's the taxpayers. So I think I am definitely behind this.
Supervisor Schoberg?
In response to Supervisor Peterson's comment, what do we mean by local control? I think I could simplify it by saying whatever is the strictest standard. So if the state gives blanket permission for frac sanding, if you got the money and the influence, have at it. And we want to protect our citizens of this county, we ought to be able to. And if we aren't doing the job and the town or the village wants to apply a stricter standard, they should be able to. So the same thing goes with high capacity wells, which I brought up earlier. Is the DNR doing the job or not? Are some of the farmers surrounding the high capacity wells all going to go without drinking water? And when that happens, we'll be making the papers because the county didn't do anything. And then we can just say, well, that was the DNR's job. And I'd like to have these issues, these discussions like Supervisor Berkey brought up, so that our local legislators are aware of the impact this can have on health and human services delivery. I would be in support of this too, as long as I don't want counties to do nothing either, so I want a state standard, and if that's not sufficient for the county, I want the county to be able to act, and if the county isn't doing the job, leave it to the cities and municipalities to do the job. Thank you.
Supervisor Hanson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would argue in support of the resolution. We need to be able to address health, and I think that the science hasn't been completed. There's opinions on both sides of the issue, and to take any anecdotal evidence into account is probably an incomplete consideration of the issue. With respect to Supervisor Schachner's comments with regard to road maintenance, there are in place protections for the county and for the communities. We've already done preparatory road maintenance by putting an additional, 1 inch of asphalt on the top of the stretch of road that the trucks will be using near Glenwood. And we have in escrow a certain amount of money for further repairs to that road. So we do have road repair covered, but that's putting a Band-Aid on something when you're looking at a more significant and profound issue such as public health, which is why we're considering this in the first place. So I'm fully in favor of this.
Any other questions? Supervisor Ring?
So I think just maybe it's a question of clarification. As I understand it, from a land use standpoint, we do have pretty rigorous standards, and those standards would be on top of state regulatory standards. It's the health issue. I mean, and then what happens is what a municipality does not have, as I understand it, doesn't follow our land use issues. But we would have authority over the health. That's my question. So if this is like an overlay sort of regulation, and that's what this is asking for, is that correct? We would, whether it's inside a municipal boundary or not, you see, from a health standpoint, that's what gives us, that makes the distinction between land use regulation and health?
I believe that's correct, exactly. We can at least make the effort to influence what happens if we have significant health concerns, which we are responsible for as a county. So that, I think, is the leverage, if you will, that we have on this issue, yeah.
And to me, it's not either or. I think I agree with what Supervisor Soberg said. If it's okay for the state to have a standard of care, but we can make it the local, what we're looking at is having a local influence as well.
That's correct. We certainly, sorry. That's correct. We have approached DNR and encouraged them to deal with this issue by issuing standards, and my understanding is that that's in process. But to my knowledge, those have not been issued yet, which maybe goes to Supervisor Hansen's point. I don't think the state has yet made a statement of its own, if you will, regarding these issues, in particular regarding the health issues, which is one of the reasons why when Fred Johnson addressed us, we were very concerned about the monitoring of the ambient air. And although there is some provision for monitoring certain molecules in the ambient air, it is not monitoring molecules small enough to catch silica sand, which, to the best of our knowledge, is the most harmful airborne side effect, if you will, of the fungicide process.
Are there any other questions? No other questions? Supervisor Brinkman.
I have a question maybe for Corp Counsel. If the state has this testing process in place, can we trump state statute and say, no, it's got to be this much better? Can we as a county even do that?
I think it's up to the way that the state rules are written and whether the state laws provide for local regulatory control. If a state rule is written like it is, for example, in the high-capacity wells, the state has exclusive jurisdiction, but if the state rules are written in such a way that they allow local regulation, then yes. So it's, I guess the short answer is, if the legislature allows us to, we can.
Any other questions? No other questions? Are we ready to vote then? Okay. And the resolution passed. We'll move on to number 4. Resolution to approve a finance position upgrade. And that, I believe, came out of Administration Committee.
Yeah, this is a resolution that is sponsored, endorsed by the Administration Committee. We have a vacant position in the Finance Department, which is assigned to the New Richmond St. Croix Service Center facility for Health and Human Services. The request from the Finance Department is to upgrade this vacant position to a lead finance specialist position in the department. And the admin committee reviewed and supported the request. It's supported by administration. There are funds available in the 2014 budget to fund the position for the remainder of the year at the upgraded level, along with the 2015 budget as well.
Do I have a motion to Supervisor Shatner? His motion, do I have a second? Second from Supervisor Kiesler? Any further discussion? Any questions? Supervisor Brinkman.
Mr. Administrator, how much money are we talking? How many dollars are we talking? I don't see that listed here anywhere.
I'd have to call on either Tabitha or Tammy Funk. Yep.
Estimate about $1,400.
For
The difference between the two positions.
the remainder of 2014?
Correct. The remainder of 2014. We had the details on, should be on the fiscal impact, so was that administration, I believe.
So $5,600 roughly.
Yes. Want me to speak to any of the details of the position or the why, or you good?
I think it would be
Supervisor
good to have more
Perky?
background. I think it's good to have a little bit more background. I support the position. If Tabitha could do that, thank you.
Okay.
So this is a finance position. It's located at Health and Human Services. It's a direct report to Beata, who's in the back corner if you don't all know her face yet. Health and Human Services has been gravely neglected. There's been a lot of turnover in Beata's fiscal manager position, and there's a lack of support underneath her. As HHS has grown and expanded programs, we've added social workers and staff. We've not added and kept pace in the finance realm. We're not able to generate revenues, produce expenditures on a timely fashion if we do not have the support on the finance level for that. Beata deals with a very complex reporting system, as HHS board can speak to, or many of you can. Currently, I'm her backup. That's not a good situation. I experienced this last June when I had the vacancy with her position doing HHS budget along with full county budget. We need to create a better depth. We need to create backup in all positions in the finance department moving forward, and this is the first step in that direction.
Thank you. Supervisor Osnes.
Tabitha, would you mind, you and I had this discussion last week. Can you kind of explain that tiered system that we went through, that you were explaining?
How the staff are arranged, sir. So it's myself as finance director. There's an assistant finance director here in Hudson. He's over the Hudson staff. We have one lead finance specialist here in Hudson. There are 4 finance specialists located here in Hudson that do all the general accounting for the payroll, the expenses, and those type of functions. Then I would have Beata. She's a fiscal manager at HHS. She in turn has an AR accounts receivable supervisor underneath her. The AR supervisor has 3 financial assistants underneath her. Beata has another financial assistant dedicated to the nursing home, one that's dedicated to the waivers, and then our current vacancy. At Highway, we have Jane Bond, who's an accounting manager, and then she has 3 financial assistants underneath her. All of those report up to me, and we provide the finance for the entire county.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Supervisor Ring.
Yeah. So the position is vacant right now? Is that correct? What I think is important is that, if I understand this right, you are asking now, because one alternative would be to hire the person at the lesser level and then upgrade later. And I think we've experienced that. And I don't like that. I like that you're being upfront, because I think it's confusing. It's like, oh, we'll take care of it later, and then it looks like an upgrade for a position that was been there 3 months. It puts us in a very awkward position. So I appreciate that you're making that request.
We have a different need and need a different skill set. So I've identified that on the front end. So seeking the market and looking for a little higher ability along with HHS experience would be great. That would be the good bonus, because it is a very complex area to train. It takes a lot of time to train and get the right person, so we want to start off correct.
Is there any other? Supervisor Ring.
On the other hand, it's nice to do these once a year. That's just not you're thinking that you're doing this because you think it's the right thing to do now?
Right, we have a vacancy, and we've already been vacant about 4 weeks, and it's a sustainability issue. It's a tough time of year to have a vacant position, and so we need to get it filled as soon as we can.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no further questions, we'll vote. Thank you. And the resolution passed unanimous. We'll move on to item number 5, a resolution supporting maintaining the existing county administrator form of government. I need a motion. That came, Supervisor Schachner made a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Hanson. Discussion? Supervisor Schachner.
This came up recently. We brought forward the motion that was made earlier in the year to the last administration meeting to talk about the impacts of what would be the preferred choice of government. It was then amended by the resolution before you was an amendment made by Supervisor Schoberg, and basically it says that our preferred governance would be with a county administrator. Much of the work has been done when we look at like Resolution 66 and the Health and Human Services Handbook and moving forward with the bylaws. A lot of that work was required to be done with the assumption that we are staying with a county administrator, and this would basically be following that up and saying we are going forward with a county administrator. Otherwise, if we go back to a county coordinator, a lot of that work would have to be redone, because then we would have to define in greater detail through the bylaws and the Health and Human Resources Handbook what the position of the county coordinator would actually entail, what powers they would have. So that is what's before us today.
Any other questions or discussion? Supervisor Schoberg.
One of my constituents, a fellow named Norm Matzik, is in the room here, and he's a common fixture watching over all of us. He was supportive of my campaign. He's eloquent. He's a man of principle, pro-democratic government all the way. I said to him 10 minutes or half hour ago, your values are the same as my values. I want representative government. I don't want a county administrator that has so much power that things happen and then we have to catch up with what's happening. So I heard all of that, and back in April, we all started looking at this issue in depth. And because so much work had been done previously by the prior county boards, we, I think, very prudently didn't take immediate action to undo everything that had been done. Instead, what happened is that we started to process everything. We found out from many of the employees what were their concerns. We kept listening to our constituents about the problems with the Ag Center, about the nursing home, about selling county assets, about all of those issues. And as I was quoted in the paper last week, we listened to a lot of other people, such as Buck Malik, such as the other prior county coordinators. We took all that into consideration. And I think when my constituent, Mr. Matzek's two-page letter was sent out to all of us, hopefully we all read it and gave it proper consideration. And I'd like to suggest that this, if you're willing to consider this as part of the record, that at least one constituent took the trouble over this last Labor weekend to compose this thoughtful letter, which I think asks a lot of deep, searching questions about who we are and what we're supposed to do. But it does boil down to, if there's problems that we need to address, are we addressing them? And I have to say that as we brought these issues up with our county administrator, I was not only impressed with his willingness to listen, but also to respond and actually be proactive along with Corporation Counsel in addressing all of our concerns. And so various implements were put into process, such as a speedy review of the employee handbook, the staff advisory committee, which I went into their first meeting to see who was on this group and how active are they afraid to speak up? Are they intimidated? And I was very impressed with the makeup of that group of advisors for our Human Resources Department. But not only was I impressed with the county administrator's responsiveness, but also with Tammy Funk and Kathy Spott at the Corporation Council. And what we did line by line, as was alluded to earlier, was to find out, was there a check and balance at this change in the road or bend in the road that needs to be there? And many were implemented as part of the employee handbook. But not all things can be, not everything is an employee relation or employee rights issue. Later we'll talk about the scope of the handbook. There are things beyond that. And to that end, the rules and bylaws is next up on the agenda for review. I look forward to participating in that review. And in fact, I had begun the review of that when the employee handbook issue seemed to be a hotter issue. But I would certain venture to guess that Corporation Counsel would be an active participant in the rewrite of the rules and bylaws, which gets to the question, how can anybody rewrite the rules and bylaws unless we know whether we have a county administrator or a county coordinator form of government? And you can't. You have to know one in order to do the other. So a question has been raised. What's the rush on approving the county administrator form of government? Do we have to do that now? And I'm very reflective and mindful of the good comments made by my constituent, Norm Metzen. And I have to say, in all fairness to my constituent, that I am not willing to scuttle the form of government that we have, and that at this point in time when we are now looking at writing the budget, proceeding with the handbook, all these other things, we need to kind of know which form of government we have first. Now it could be, having said all that once we fix the rules and bylaws, once we have the new handbook in place, that the car still doesn't run right. But be mindful that we own the car. The county administrator is not a dictator. He is more, not so much like a CEO of a for-profit organization where he has all this control. He is more like an executive director, if I could, of a nonprofit organization. We are the board of directors. We direct what he does. And so far, everything that we've directed of him has been implemented speedily. So I kind of like to have a very effective person that does our work. And I'm worried that if we go back to a county coordinator type of position, we'll lose the ability to have effective implementation of our policies and guidance. So with all due respect to my constituent, I would want to propose, first of all, that his 2-page memo, form of government article, be placed in the official record if you're all willing, but that I would be in support of acting even today and approving the county administrator role of government.
Is there any other discussion, input before we, Supervisor Babbitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, I am one of the group of supervisors who are newly elected to this board. And as I say to everyone I speak to about this position, I've been involved in a very steep learning curve here over the last 4 or 5 months. I've not made it a secret that I have a lot to learn, and I've not made it a secret that I intend to try to do that learning by not only talking to other supervisors, but to constituents and to others who are knowledgeable, more so than I, about this critically important issue. I'm sure, like Supervisor Schoberg and many others on the board, when I was running for this position, I heard an awful lot of not very flattering statements about county operations, which I took to heart, still understanding that I had a lot to learn moving forward. When I first sat on this board, if this vote had come up, I would have voted in a certain direction. But now, having sat on the board for a period of time and having at least begun the process of understanding county governance, beginning to understand how things work in the world, not all of which I like very much, but nonetheless trying to understand that, my position has slowly begun to evolve in a somewhat different direction. My feeling at this point is that clearly the Administration Committee has done an extraordinary amount of work. I think it's incumbent on all of us to trust the work that our committees do and to believe that they have the best interests of the citizens of the county in mind as they do that work, and that when a resolution comes forth from a committee to the full board, that it is backed up by all of that work and consideration. Therefore, my feeling today is that with what I believe are emerging checks and balances and what may well be future work on similar checks and balances, that we should support the resolution.
Supervisor Hanson.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that this process has been frustrating. I'd like to thank Supervisor Peterson for slowing down that rush that we all felt based on a prevailing attitude before the election. I want to say that as I vote in favor of this resolution, my vote is also a vote of confidence in our administrator. And I think that Mr. Thompson's done a very professional job through this process, which has been, has to have been terribly strainful upon him. And I'm looking forward to continuing operations and observing operations without this hanging over everybody's head. Thank you.
Supervisor Berkey.
Okay. As many of you know, I actually, from the Administration Committee, did not support this resolution. And I'll make some points with respect to why I feel that an administrative coordinator position is more appropriate for St. Croix County. And keep in context that we are a small county in the state of Wisconsin. only 600 employees. Often I think we get compared to the La Crosses and the Madisons and larger communities that we are not. And that's not to take away from the fact that we are across from the Twin Cities. I do appreciate that, but we do have a relatively small workforce. I'm concerned about the lack of accountability that's given to we as elected county board supervisors with respect to an administrator versus the administrative coordinator. And that's appreciating the information that our Corp Counsel, Scott Cox, has provided to us. Many of us have reviewed and gone through that more than once. I think that checks and balances are weaker with the administrative form of government. I often ask, is there a loss of some operational oversight? I'm not going to go into any specific examples, but myself also having been relatively newly elected, although being fairly well informed over the years and being involved in different levels of local government in St. Croix County. I think then that it's imperative that we as county board members, the elected representatives to our constituents, pay very close attention in our committees, participation with our employees and all the many vast programs and projects throughout the county. I don't want us to lose that hands-on approach to county government. I often hear the comment that I don't want to get into the minutia. I don't want to spend 2 days looking at budgets. I think it's our responsibility to look at details and to be able to answer questions, whether it's on a local municipal level or certainly on the county level. Lastly, and I'm expecting that this is going to pass, we need to review and modify as appropriate the bylaws of the county governance to best respect our elected county body, our St. Croix County citizens, and our employees. We still have a lot of work to do, and I would like to be part of that task force if in fact that is the direction that we're taking to look more closely. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Supervisor Peavy.
I just wanted to make a real short comment. Having been on this board under the administrative coordinator and under the administrator coordinator did not work well in this county, especially this budget time of year. It was a real hassle. So I'm going to support this resolution for keeping the administrator as our form of government, and trusting and assuming that the administration committee is going to come up with bylaw changes and rules that will echo Supervisor Berkey's comments to keep the board informed and in control and knowing what we're going forward. But I just think the administrator is the best way to serve the people of this county. Thank you.
Supervisor Peterson.
I'd just like to restate simply also, I worked for 2 years under the administrative coordinator on the finance committee and 2 years on the administration committee under the administration form. And there's no way that I would ever want to go back to that administrative coordinator. And I'd like to also commend Supervisor Soberg and the administration committee for the work on this. Thank you.
Supervisor Schottner.
I think that we have to, this is not saying that we are not going to be able to hold our current county administrator accountable. That is a vital aspect of this board, is that if something happens where we need to hold him accountable, it must be done through the will of the full board. And we must be willing to take that action. That is how we hold him accountable as a group. And I think that is vital to remember and acknowledge when every meeting that we do. The other aspect is, I think moving from a county administrator or a coordinator to an administrator is a way of setting up the county in the future to have a more democratic position. It is going through growth spurts and going through the pains, but this steps us up so that in the future, I'm not going to say in the next couple of years, but it's down the line, 10, 15 years, the county administrator position is probably going to become a county executive position due to our growth. And that means that this board will have a lot less power than it does now. And that's just a growing pain that we have to acknowledge that we're going through. So it's going to take a while to get there, but I think that would be, if we were to vote on it today, I would totally support it, but that's not the case. I think that we need to have a democratic position in that position, but this is the growth spurt that we need now.
Any other discussion? Any other input? If not, are we all ready to vote? We have a motion and a second. Schottner's. Oh, Supervisor Kiesler.
Well, thank you, Chairman Larson. I would just like to say, again, for the record, because I've been in support of a coordinator form of government. I worked for St. Croix County for 24 years, and so I disagree with folks that say it doesn't work. It can work. I currently work for a county with an administrative coordinator at Pierce County, and it works. So it's a form of government that can work. It's not whether it can work or not. What I think we need to do is call ourselves on the carpet, which we don't do very well, unfortunately. It's not whether a county coordinator or a county administrator is the right form of government. The question is, how much work do we want to put into the system? And so an administrative coordinator requires that a county board put in a lot of work. And as your county grows in size, it requires a lot more work. Now, as we moved to a county administrator, I think what we were saying as a board at that time, and I didn't serve on the board at that time, that we didn't want to do as much work, quite frankly. We wanted to turn it over to someone that was going to do that full time for us. Unfortunately, when I saw that process take place, and since we've used an automobile as an analogy, we immediately put it on cruise control and stepped aside, and then just watched and waited and saw what was going to take place. I think what we're doing now is we're taking it off of cruise control. I agree 110% with Supervisor Schulberg's analogy, comments, and statements that he made here today. I couldn't support them more. What I would just like to do is call us all on the carpet, because I did sit on the board 2 years ago, and I do take responsibility for not getting more active in putting some checks and balances in place. And so as we move forward, I do believe this will pass resoundingly. I do believe it's a workable form of government. I do believe it allows the county board members to sit back a bit. I think this board was put in place to say, wait a minute, things are not going as well as they could. We can expect more of our administration. We can expect more of ourselves. We need to take the time and the effort to put that in, because I think our administrator did exactly what he was told to do by the former board. I think he did exactly what he was told not to do by the former board. And now, I would agree with Supervisor Solberg that he is doing exactly what we are telling him to do, very expeditiously. And he is doing exactly what we tell him not to do, very expeditiously. So I don't think it's as much the individual as it is, it's a team effort. I guess that's the bottom line. And I think at this point, the team is stepping up and saying, we want a CEO to take charge, but we also want to be, as a board, actively involved. I couldn't applaud that more. I thank every single board member here today for stepping up to the plate and saying we want to be more active. And I appreciate that our administrator is willing to work with us to say, that's fine. But if you're not going to tell me what to do, then I'm going to need to do something. And we're going to do it to the best, he's going to do it to the best of his ability. One head is good, 19 heads are better. And I think with that, we can all collectively bring our expertise, our wisdom to bear. A lot of great work has been done with the handbook. We're still looking to discuss that today. I think a lot of work needs to be done with the bylaws. I look forward to engaging in that process and in future contracts. I mean, the administrator works under a contract, and we are responsible to develop that contract and put that in place. And so I think there are mechanisms to improve what's taking place, and I think, quite frankly, it's working. Morale is starting to improve as I talk to the staff and the department heads. We've settled a contract that is long overdue, over 18 months with the law union. I applaud that effort and the work that the Chair of Public Protection, Andy Brinkman, sitting next to me here, has done with our county administrator to move that forward. I think that did a great deal, and I'm hearing that, you know, from the employees and the department heads that the handbook is a great relief. It's long overdue, and that we have a expeditious checks and balance to review that on a timely basis. Those are the things that are starting to improve the morale. It's you know, it's a 100-piece puzzle. It's not one big piece, but we have to attend to each of those pieces individually, put those in place very carefully, and outline what we want it to look like when the day is done. So with that, you will see that I will be changing my position, and I felt I needed to explain a little bit about why I am doing that. But that's the person I am. I will be very passionate about what I believe in, but I will never be not willing to listen to all aspects of an argument, all aspects of decision making, and then make a decision, even if that means changing my position. Hopefully, others in our state and in our nation will see that as maybe something good that can come out of this for the future, not only of our county, but setting the tone for how folks can continue to learn from each other and move forward collectively in a productive manner. So thank you for giving me the time.
We've had a lot of discussion, probably enough discussion. Can we have a motion on the floor and a second? Are we all ready to vote? Thank you. We'll vote on that. And the resolution is passed, so we'll move on. We'll get into our last resolution on the agenda today. That's a resolution amending the Human Resources Policies and Procedure Handbook. And I will turn that back over to the Administration Committee. I'm looking for a motion on that.
Move to bring it.
Motion. I have a second. Motion by Supervisor Berkey to second that. Now we're up for discussion.
these are some,
Who wants this? Supervisor Troutner?
going through the, I was not a part of the whole process going through this, but there are some major changes that have been brought forward as far as pertains to the Human Resources Handbook. Personally, one of the major ones is that it's coming back before the board. During the last county board sessions, we had passed the responsibility of county review over to the administration suite and to our county administrator, but this is us taking the responsibility back and being involved in the policies and the procedures that are in it, mostly the policies. But it was Supervisor Schoberg and Supervisor Ochterhoff that did most of the work as far as it pertains to members of the county board when it was brought before the administration committee. So I would wish to discuss about some of the major things that were done.
Supervisor Schoberg?
It's 5 to noon. If you're planning on getting out of here at noon, you might be disappointed. But just a few brief remarks, and then I believe Corporation Counsel is going to highlight some items.
I'll go there.
Okay. I'd just like to preface a few things, saying what were the goals in reviewing the handbook, and I got just a few of those. One was to define the roles of the board, elected officials, HR department, county administration, parent committees, department heads, administration committee, and the steering committee, all those different groups, all those different stakeholders with respect to the employment here at St. Croix County. And so throughout the handbook, everybody's role is now better defined. And then we added the role of an employee group representative. So employees out there, if you're feeling like you don't have the personality that can bring forward an important question, you do have the express authority without any threat of reprisal against you to form an employee group, have someone represent your interests, and bring anything to the attention of the HR department so that your voice can be better heard. There's a few procedures in place to just kind of control how that all happens a little bit more. And then we've already spoken to the fact that lots of checks and balances were put in. So to the effect that it involves employment issues and rights, hiring and firing of people, promotions, all of those things, much more checks and balances have come in. Some of those addressing some of the real hot issues that happened before many of us were elected to the board. One of the things that we addressed that was very important to the staff advisory group is the pay grid. The pay grid out there, which is, if you're all familiar with how that works, there's different steps along the way depending on the amount of experience you've had and your classification. And it's our goal, and it's now put in place in the employee handbook, that that pay grid is going to be reviewed annually in order to make sure that it meets our goal of employee confidence in it. And by that, and integrity. So we're not having one system in place for certain staff and another system in place for others. It's going to be try to get everybody under one tent. So there's a list now of counties that are brought into consideration for comparison. And if I'm the HR director, or if I am another employee, I know that the comparables are going to be largely the same, if not exactly the same. We're also trying to treat all employees alike. So the nursing home employees, which had different benefits, are now being brought back into the same tent with all of us. We all had a special day on the pay for performance, didn't we? We remember all that discussion. And what we heard was that if you're doing your job and you're a member of an employee here at the county, you can expect to get a base increase if you're doing your job. And that's now what we've put in place, and that's part of the employee handbook, and Scott will probably reference where that is. But as was also discussed, and I'll end my remarks now, is that not everything is in place yet. It certainly, there'll be every once in a while a term that if you trace it all the way through, maybe it's going to have a different meaning in another context. And we're going to try to have in the future a dedicated article that just defines terms, and that will appease Supervisor Ochterhoff. She had a lot of issues over the word complaint. And if we're really bold, we'll even include an index. But one of the issues that was maybe not fully settled, fully discussed was one person's probation status. So we gave it some attention, but it's probably not completely settled. And so that will be reviewed. But I would, again, like to end my remarks by saying how impressed I was with the work done by the Staff Advisory Committee and the Special Subcommittee. Hats off to Scott Cox's assistant there, our paralegal, Kathy Spott, who on more than one occasion did work after hours so that we'd have something in a little bit cleaner shape to work on the next day. So to Kathy, hats off to you. Scott.
Thank you, Roy. Roy actually hit a lot of my points, but I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail. Yesterday, I was sitting down to write my notes about the handbook, and I thought to myself, well, it's Labor Day, I'm not going to do that. So I got up early and wrote my notes. But at the top of my notes, there's a note suggesting that this handbook provides more accountability, a balance of power between the county board, the admin committee, and the administrator, and I think that's true. One thing that struck me when I came to St. Croix County 10 months ago was the handbook and how much authority it actually vested in the administrator over a whole lot of things, with the word review, or sometimes not the word review. I think this handbook is a good start in terms of refining and involving both or all of the actors, including the stakeholders, the employee group representatives, but ultimately it's the county board that makes the decision in terms of what kind of policies you want to have for your employees. So that's the concept that Roy was talking about, is that it has a concept called an employee group and an employee group representative. Now, these aren't official labor organizations, they're not collective bargaining organizations, but there are people or groups that can register with the HR department. They're a stakeholder in the process of the formulation and review of the handbook, suggesting and participating at times with the admin committee and making recommendations to the county board. So I think that's somewhat unique. And there are procedures laid out in Article 1 describing that. And one thing I would say, ultimately, it's the county board that makes the policy decision as to how the county is going to treat its employees within the confines of Wisconsin law. I'm going through article by article and just summarizing what's new. You heard about Child Support Tuesdays. Well, I have to be there at 1 o'clock, and I don't want to miss that because that's exciting. So I'll keep this short. Article 1 creates an expectation when any department head is dismissed that the administrator review that with the admin committee shortly after that event takes place. Now, there was some discussion at the committee level of whether there can be additional constraints, reviews by the board, by the committee, by someone. But the statute's very clear that the department heads serve at the pleasure of the county administrator. So any kind of constraint is really not contemplated by the Wisconsin statutes unless the county had a full-blown civil service ordinance for which you could develop a whole series of rules where everybody's reviewed before they're dismissed. So, and I know that's been a question for a lot of you, is whether in fact the department heads can be part of the grievance procedure, and my answer is no, because statutorily they serve at the pleasure. Serve at the pleasure means they're at-will employees. Article 1.
What would it take to actually develop a civil service ordinance?
Well, it's done through an ordinance. The same kind of process that it took to do this handbook, but probably even more work than what we've done so far. I would describe civil service ordinances that applied countywide as complicated, needing more staff than we currently have. And generally, those civil service ordinances are only in the very large Wisconsin counties like Dane, Milwaukee, Kenosha, that sort of size of a county. So certainly we could do it, but it would be a process to develop that ordinance. It covers a whole lot of other things besides dismissal in a much more formal fashion than the way this handbook does it. So yes, it can be done. Article 1 provides a review process so that as Supervisor Schoberg mentioned, so that the employees have confidence in the pay grid. It's reviewed annually. So those are the major things in Article 1. I'm going to skip by Article 2 because a lot of that is really the same. Just as a bit of history, the county's handbook first was promulgated back in 1995 and existed, I think, virtually unscathed until shortly or right after Act 10, and then there were some major changes. Article 3 talks about the classification plan. It creates new procedures for reclassifications and regrades of positions, providing more checks and balances between the administration committee, and county board. Reclassifications are normally part of the budget process. If there is an emergent need to reclassify or regrade a position, that can be done during the year, but it needs approval of the administration committee and the county board. Article 3 also provides that the classification plan, which is different than the grid. The grid is the grid of wages for each class, but a classification plan is where each position should be placed on the grid. The Article 3 provides that plan be reviewed at least 3 years to make sure that it accurately reflects existing position responsibilities and labor market conditions. And it needs admin approval and county board approval. So if you're getting a theme here, the county board now is approving many of the items that were left to either the admin committee, and then back in 2012, solely the responsibility of the administrator. As Supervisor Schoberg mentioned, we have a definition for a labor market for which we're going to be basing our wages on. They consist of the counties of Dunn, Eau Claire, Manitowoc, Ozaukee, Pierce, Polk, Portage, Sauk, Sheboygan, Washington, Barron, Chippewa, Dodge, and Douglas in the state of Wisconsin, and the counties of Dakota, Ramsey, Rice, and Washington in the state of Minnesota. So although there's some Minnesota counties in that labor market, they are only a factor, not the majority factor in determining what the market wage is, because their weight's going to be, as a group, if it's averaged, less than the weight of the Wisconsin counties. I'm going to now go to Article 6. As Supervisor Schoberg mentioned, It incorporates the pay-for-performance system currently used by the board, but with the following important modification. And that is, if an employee's satisfactorily in performing their job as a county employee, they're going to be entitled to a grade increase unless they're at the top of their grade or their pay scale. Then they will receive a market adjustment. Furthermore, the grading is going to be a little bit more simplified because there were provisions in the system that ended in May where there was a score of 3.0 to 3.9, which was a merit, and then 4.0 to 4.69, which was a grade or a base, and then 4.7 to 5, which is a merit plus base or a base plus merit. That's simplified. There's only going to be two categories of wage criteria in which employees get a wage increase, and that's from 3.0 to 3.9, and then scoring from 4.0 to 5. In addition to the base increase, they get a merit increase, which is unspecified, and that was done on purpose because it will depend on how many funds and how good a position the county is to fund that merit increase. One of the critical issues that when I first got here was the grievance process and how it appeared to be unfair to employees because the burden of proof was on the employee to prove that they did not violate the rule and that the punishment was not correct. Shortly after Act 10 was made law, which was July in 2011, counties were given 3 months to develop a grievance procedure, and a lot of those counties adopted virtually the same grievance procedure. The grievance procedure had to apply to discipline, which in our handbook is demotion, suspension without pay, termination, which kind of speaks for itself, and workplace safety. So a lot of counties rushed out these grievance policies, and they read virtually the same with respect to the discipline and termination. It was on the employee's burden to prove that they didn't violate a work rule, and the employee's burden to prove that the punishment was not fair. What we've returned to is a grievance procedure, at least for termination and demotion, suspension, that looks very much like the grievance procedure when the county had full collective bargaining. And it looks that way because the standard is different. The county has to prove, it's the county's burden to prove that there was just cause to terminate the employee. Just cause is defined in a number of different ways by people, labor arbitrators. It generally involves 7 tests, and I won't necessarily go through those tests, but they are located on page 11-1, page 183 of your packet. So those are the 7, and under sub 9, just cause means a legally sufficient reason for discipline or termination. And A through G describe those factors which all have to be answered yes in order for the county to establish the discipline. So if an employee is suspended without pay, if an employee is terminated, they have the right to file a grievance. They have the right to have that reviewed by the department head. If they don't agree with the department head's determination, they have the right to request a hearing. before an independent hearing officer. And who's that person? Well, we've defined who that person will be. Those will be a block of staff arbitrators from the WERC for which the county and the employee will pick alternatively until there's one person left. So there's that grievance procedure, independent hearing, and if the employee is not satisfied with the result of that, they may appeal to the county board. And I received a question, well, why do they appeal to the county board? That seems kind of awkward. I might agree with that person, but that's the law. Unless the county has a civil service ordinance, one of the stipulations of Act 10 is that the municipal employer has to have a grievance procedure in which the body, the governmental body, is the ultimate decider of the discipline. So the county doesn't have an option of having some other body be the ultimate decision maker. You have to be, but it won't be a full-blown hearing. It will be a review of the record that's created from the hearing. And so you have to decide whether the decision that was made by the hearing officer is reasonable, and there are standards set forth on page 11-5. The standards are whether there was any procedural error or abuse of discretion by the hearing officer. And then the county board then has the option of voting to affirm, modify, or reverse the decision of the hearing officer and remand the decision back to the hearing officer for further proceedings if they find that the hearing officer's decision was clearly erroneous. So the standards before the county board are deferential to the hearing officer, but it's another check and balance if for some reason that the hearing officer made a mistake or the county board believes that the hearing officer made a mistake, the county board gets to override the decision of the hearing officer. The decision of the county board is final. Because we're only including the more severe forms of discipline in the grievance procedure, and there was a reason for that, and the reason being we did not want to include verbal or oral warnings or written warnings in the full-blown procedure to the county board. We created an alternative complaint procedure, and that's Article 12, which provides a mechanism to complain if you've been issued an oral warning, a written warning, or you don't think that the HR director or your department head or someone else has properly administered the handbook. So this is a less formal complaint procedure. Is Judy in? We had a lot of discussion about the word complaint. So this is a less formal complaint procedure, which will not go to the full county board. If it's a complaint regarding a written warning or an alleged violation of the handbook, the ultimate decision maker through the appeal steps is the administration committee. If it's a complaint regarding a verbal warning, the last step will be the county administrator. And that was discussed at the handbook committee, and that's what the handbook committee felt comfortable stopping at the administrator with a complaint about a verbal warning. And then I'm just going to talk about a couple other things and we'll answer questions. We've adopted a new policy, or you would be adopting a new policy. I believe it's the last policy, Article 21, which is called the Workplace Bullying Policy. And the reason why this was suggested and actually suggested by the HR director, is this is becoming, it's somewhat involved. There are rules that sort of cover this. The sexual harassment or harassment rules sort of cover it. The work rules sort of cover it. But we have dealt with situations in which employees have felt ostracized. And so this type of complaint will be used. Somebody has the right to complain, and there'll be an investigation, much like an harassment investigation. There are definitions of what constitutes bullying. And so ultimately, if there's a complaint, it'll be treated like any other harassment complaint. There aren't the federal or state legal protections for bullying that there are for harassment based upon sex, race, or any other protected class. But the HR director, and I agree, felt it was important enough to put this in to stop and to curtail harmful behavior in the workplace. And I think I've hit everything that's new, except, you want to discuss the overtime rule?
Good afternoon. Yeah, Scott hit most of the major points, but one of the other things that have come up from employees over time since Act 10 was the change in how overtime applied to employees. So a lot of the union contracts used to have overtime in a day or kind of any time counted. Act 10, we really moved to the Fair Labor Standard. So employees were not receiving time and a half or comp time accrual until they actually worked 40 hours. So in the week of a holiday or week that you took PTO, many employees kind of were a little frustrated if they had to work overtime, and while they were paid for it, it was straight time. So after a lot of discussion, the handbook committee, made the decision to define work as paid time. And that was an important thing if we're going to do that we do that now, because it does have budget implications. So for our 24/7 facilities, such as like emergency communications, the director is working to include that. He very supports this because there are times that it's been difficult when we've had to force a dispatcher to stick around to cover another shift, and yet knowing that was not going to be overtime. So that's a big change. The health center is going to have to do some adjustments for that, but I've talked with the nurse administrator, and we had 2 staff people on the handbook committee as well, and they think just communication with staff is going to be helpful in there. Scott kind of also hit the points that some of the changes in terms of benefits, so life and long-term disability as of January 2015 will once again be provided to employees at the health center. That was a concession that they made years ago. So that's an important thing to bring them back. We also will be moving them back to the same 10 paid holidays and the way holidays are defined, which they've had 6.5 for the last few years, and moving to bring them back whole in terms of PTO accrual, because new employees that have been hired at the health center that had benefit eligibility have been earning PTO at a lower rate. So HR will work to identify those and transition them back to that. One other couple quick things. Probation is now defined as 12 months for employees. It had been unclear what that was, what was the practice, and there are different implications like pay for performance. So we've now defined, and this actually matches with the sheriff's union who has worked over the last couple contracts to define. So all employees other than department heads serve a 12-month probation period, and that's laid out for them. We also, in the salary administration, so Article 6, that was the pay for performance change, and that was supported by the staff advisory committee, the handbook committee, and I think mentioned by department heads and all of you at our committee of the whole, where an employee who is achieving shall receive a step increase if they have one to move to, and if they exceed, there's something else. But we also have other types of things like cost of living increases, if those are able to occur, and we have employees that have been deemed redlined. So the question has always been, so should they just kind of sit off to the side frozen? Pay for performance allows them to get a merit. But after a lot of discussion, I think the handbook committee came up to kind of a good compromise where maybe they can't get that 2% as a base increase, but they could be paid out to them as a merit. It's not their fault that they are kind of above the market, and I think that was a good adjustment for them. So, well, as County Administrator Thompson mentioned, yeah, there's still some other things, some additional
cleanup, for as we move to the results-only work environment, there's a lot of things in there about flexible scheduling that aren't probably as important. I know the IT director is gonna work on some IT policies. I think it is a really good work product. It's one of those things that we've always wanted to get to, and, this was a great, fast timeline to get it accomplished. I wanna really thank all of the department heads who had to work really hard to kind of get through this and get us any comments. And I'd just like to briefly mention the names of the handbook committee because they had to do a lot of quick 7 a.m. meetings, and I think that's important as well. So Teresa Quam, Kathy Halverson, Dawn Knoll, Erica Nelson, Jody Frick Formiller, Colleen Crone, Lana Thompson, Marilyn Bartos, Katie Thermos, Casey Swetlick, Annette Massey, Sheriff Schultz, and then Scott, Pat, myself, and then, of course, Supervisor Schoberg and Supervisor Achterhoff. So I think it was a very good product. I appreciate those from staff advisory that volunteered to assist on that, as well as some staff that aren't on staff advisory, but it was important that we had representation from their departments as well. So I don't know if there's any questions for Scott or I on this?
I just want to, everybody else has said almost everything, but I will have to commend the staff advisory and the handbook committee. They were superb. They were honest, they were blunt. I couldn't have asked any more. The employees, it was exceptional. And also letting all the other supervisors know this is not perfect. It never will be perfect because everything is a continuum. It keeps changing. We looked at the big major things. I got tons of sticky notes on here. The ones with the red circle were the ones that were important. The other ones are minor, and as time goes on, hopefully we will keep this in mind and go through this every year. Doesn't have to be at the level that we went through this year, but we will get it so that at least it's 99% accurate. But just thanks to everyone that worked on this. It was a very positive experience.
Supervisor Nielsen?
Does the employee handbook apply equally across the board to all county employees, or does it ever have to be subjugated to a union contract? I'm thinking of law enforcement.
The law enforcement contract controls. So.
They have their own grievance procedure there?
They do.
This just would apply to them where the contract is silent, then they come under the handbook.
Supervisor Nelson?
I got one question about pay for performance. I think Roy brought it up before. Is an individual employee allowed to opt out and just get a basic raise every year? And are there repercussions if they decide not to be involved in pay for performance? Because I thought that was one of the things that you'd brought up before. Because if you have an employee who's actually very good at their job, but doesn't really want to go chase the carrot all the time, just wants to do a pay raise because they got other things that are more important outside of work that they dedicate their time to. And are there repercussions if they decide they don't want to be part of it? Is the supervisor going to come down on them for not to basically march into the pay for performance?
That was an issue that was discussed not only with the handbook subcommittee, but also the staff advisory committee. And it was felt that there could not be individual exceptions granted, at least at this time. That for it to have any meaning at all, it's got to be all encompassing. What the repercussions are of non-compliance, the pay for performance section is not complete and total, and I'll let Tammy speak to this. The Human Resources Department will have its own rules as to what goals are we looking for, how do you fill out, what you need to fill out in forms in order to be in compliance, what do department heads have to do for their interview process. All the nitty-gritty detail work is not part of the handbook. The handbook's a little bit more rigid, and we have a little bit more flexibility from Human Resources Department, not of which won't be reviewed by Administration Committee, but we're letting them write those procedure processes. But to be direct with your answer, individual opt-out is not available, at least at this structure. Tammy?
And I think one good clarification on that, Supervisor Nelson, might be how pay for performance has changed over time. So I think when pay for performance was originally implemented and goals, which is what I think most people think of what I could opt out of, because they're not going to opt out of doing their job, was 60% of your score. Then the second round was 50%. The third round, goals themselves are actually not individually rated anymore. It's part of a 6 core competency, and that was a change made from the Staff Advisory Committee based on feedback from employees, I think similar to that. And so with this change, we're at a 3-0, where all you're doing is achieving expectations. In some ways, you do have a choice, because you decide, am I gonna meet the expectations of my job? Or if I want that carrot, if I want the merit, I'm gonna try to exceed. So employees really do kind of have that choice. Do I have to set a goal or not? We've kind of said we think every employee should have at least one goal. You can have up to 3, but I think, what we need to continually work with employees and their supervisors on is that goal shouldn't be busy work. That goal should be something the employee is interested in or is somehow going to make their job more easier, more efficient, give a better outcome for their customers. So I think we still have some work to do on that, so employees don't feel like pay for performance is something in addition to their job. It's actually part of the job and gives them the ability for those annual increases. And if you choose to put in a little extra effort, you also are rewarded.
Any other discussion? Any other questions? Supervisor Leibfried.
I know in the nursing home right now isn't under the pay for performance. With this handbook and the resolution, would we be approving them to go to the pay for performance?
That's been the intention. I think it will actually come separately, similar to how all of the rest of the groups have come on. So we'll now need to look at where would the health center come on to the wage grid. If you remember Scope and Highway, when they went on to the wage grid, what they received initially was kind of that 3% offset, and then we would move them into a cycle. So because pay for performance is definitely going to be new for the health center, what I've thought is we spend the time the rest of this year to figure out where they would go on a wage grid, and then we do training, and then beginning that May 2015 through April 2016 is when they would actually be in the full cycle. So we would likely be bringing a resolution to you as the county board for where we think they should be placed on the grid and how that should be implemented, whether that's, again, paid for out of, kind of a contingency fund or sales tax as we have in the past. But the idea is that, yeah, the health center will move to pay for performance, so all employees would be on that other than the sheriff's union.
Supervisor Ring.
I too have many pages of sticky notes. And I think Supervisor Achterhoff made a really good point about, what is important out of that. And so I just too want to appreciate all the work that was put into this by everybody. And I'm sure all the board members do. I do have some questions and I've got a couple of comments. So where is the pay grid? Is that part of this or not? As we look at what the policy is, and that's what I think this board needs to be about. We reference one and we talk about it happening at the budget time. So is that part of this or not? Is it a separate thing that's a budget thing?
Well, the pay grid, as it's listed in there, is available on the intranet and within Human Resources. So we've sent it to you before. There's kind of the non-represented and then the additional, and they actually kind of all come together. So as
are
part
we
of the
adopting,
budget,
if we adopt this, see, we're going to change it then next month, aren't we, or likely?
You're not making any change to a pay grid right now. If we make across the board increase as part of budget, then at that time you would be approving a change to the pay grid. So this handbook doesn't define the pay grid because that's actually kind of outside of kind of in that Human Resources section that Supervisor Schoberg approved, and that any changes to that come through you as outlined in the handbook. So you're not making any change to a pay grid today as part of approving the handbook.
There is an existing pay grid.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're adopting that.
Previous boards have already adopted the pay grids that are in place and the classification plan.
So we have a supervisor.
Yeah.
I don't know that you're per se adopting it, but what the handbook says before there are any changes it has to go to this board before there are any changes.
Okay. And then what we're also saying is it's part of the
Yep.
budget process.
Yes.
Is like
Madam Supervisor, would you mind if I ask a follow-up question on that, if you don't mind? When you're talking the pay grid is on the intranet, supervisors, you need to know we have no access to the intranet. That's strictly for employees. So my question with that is, if that grid is being given to our employees, what's the process for us to see the same thing?
I mean, there's a number of different options. We have actually in the past included on the internet as well. Although now since we've moved to NeoGov, each job actually has its own kind of outline and salary, so all the information's always on there. It was all in your materials for committee of the whole, but we could sure send those out again. If changes are recommended to it, we would again be bringing it through, you know, as formal documents through approval of the budget or a resolution if we're doing either market changes or doing across the board increases.
And at the committee of the whole, we talked about some kind of employee engagement survey. I guess I have a question about that. If we want to do that, I think as supervisors, that's one of the indicators that we could look at to say, you know, how are the employees feeling? That's one question. Another question is, do we have any internships? They weren't referenced at all, and I heard from a constituent that we have had unpaid people in positions for long periods of time here. If that should be addressed, if that is indeed the policy or the case. And then another thing is, what about exit interviews? Is that the appropriate place? I mean, it seems to, I understand we do them. It's not referenced here. If we do them, I think that is another indicator. If we could get some kind of summary report of kind of, you know, what people are feeling from the heart. No names, but just general trends and themes. So those are.
Can I answer any of those?
3, yeah.
Okay, so the engagement survey, which was talked about a lot at the strategic planning session and as one of the county administrator's goals. The staff advisory, I almost refer to pay for performance committee because that's what it used to be, the staff advisory committee always does a survey following a pay for performance cycle. And so again, we did that, but the second cycle, we had added kind of a second session or section that said, hey, tell us some more about things besides pay for performance. So what we did this time, knowing that a kind of a benchmark was needed and was being desired, we added some additional questions. So I would say that we actually have done an engagement survey that we could share with, you know, with the board as we have the first 2 pay for performance surveys. Staff advisory committee just got it at their August meeting. And what they're going to be doing now, because we've made the changes in pay for performance, is spending time reviewing that. What are the themes? What are concerns? And then creating the action plan about if there really are some issues that need to be addressed, what's that going to be? The quick look isn't any different than the one we did before. More communication, people wanting to be informed what's the right way, more staff training. So while they appreciate the leadership training, what training is being offered for line staff? So this time we actually asked the question, okay, you said you want training, but what kind of training do you want? So now we'll be developing a plan. And so I think there'll be an appropriate time for us to bring that either to the administration committee or the entire county board so that you can see what's been identified and what is kind of the plan from the staff advisory committee to begin to address those. And then when do we measure again? Is it the next survey? Is that the right time? That's kind of how we've set it up. Or is there a need to do something ahead of that? So that's the engagement one.
And part of my point is that's nowhere referenced in this.
Mm-mm.
And it seems to me, if that's our handbook and we're asking for that, that it should be.
That a survey should be in the handbook? I mean, to me, I would see that.
Not the results, that we do it.
I guess the committee could talk about that. I mean, that's why we had the annual review of the handbook, because I already have a whole list of things that need to kind of also get reflected, the fleet policy and how that works in. So I could definitely put that on there. The exit interviews is the same thing. You're right, we do them. HR offers either in person or an electronic exit interview with every employee that's retiring or resigning. You don't always get a lot of information back, you know, from an employee that's immediately discharged, but we do offer. Many employees give a lot of information in a very confidential way. So that is sent to me, and I think even the old handbook or bylaws talked about my reviewing those with the administration committee on a quarterly basis. And so if that's something that we want to put either in the rules and bylaws or in the handbook, I think that would be okay. I know there have been some discussion about county board members sitting in on exit interviews, and I always would leave that to the employee. If they want a representative with them, whoever that is, they always could. It's generally just the HR generalist or myself, it's a management person. Supervisors also do their own exit interviews with staff as they're leaving as well, you know, to the extent that that works, and that's not defined in the handbook either, but. I think you had one more, and I'm trying to remember what the middle one was. You know, there are internships. They're not coordinated by the Human Resources Department. So Human Services has internships. I believe maybe the Sheriff's Office, Veterans Office has some. So I'm not actually involved in overseeing those. There are some times that there are pieces that go through the Risk Management Office. I'm not aware of any ongoing unpaid internships because the IRS is definitely really cracking down on those. Now, some of them could be if through a full credited program from their school. So a lot of it depends how the internship is defined and if the person is getting credit for that as opposed to a summer internship that you often usually have to pay at least minimum wage. So if you had more specifics, I could look into it.
No, well, I just think these, it seems to be silent on those three things, and I think they should be reflected. So then, thank you for all those responses. So another, I'm glad that, following the strategic meeting, that pay for performance, I know that it's not perfect, and I guess we don't want to get, perfect to get in the way of good. So I think there's been a lot of really good work here. And to me, pay for performance is about two things. It's about doing good work, and it's about improving how we do that work. And everybody has a responsibility to do that, and that system seems to, that's what I think it offers us. So but one of the misses, and I'm thinking of moving to add it. It just seems to me in two places that we're not listening enough to department heads, and I know you've referenced that you have, but they're not at the table. And it seems to be in the same way that the advisory committee is, that other people have, even board members. And I just think, can we move them into the process? There's two places. You've added them to the stakeholders, and I appreciate that. But they have a little bit different, they will have a different, maybe have a different approach. I mean, I just think every day they're not looking at our administrative coordinator, our employees. They're not necessarily working with our HR director. They're working with those department heads. And the department heads are on the front lines of steering the ship, in our strategic direction. They're the ones that have to make these very difficult decisions. There was a long discussion about how we get rid of department heads. I think I would like to just see their engagement in a couple places, I think in Article 1 and Article 6, that just include them as more active stakeholders. When they're not at the table and you just ask for review at the end, I think it's just much harder to influence at the end of a process as opposed to being a member at the table. And then it can be a little bit adversarial. When we're hearing a lot about this great team, and I know you have some supervisors on it, but I think we should respect them enough to say that they're on the team. So those are my comments. And I would, just any feedback either from...
Well, we had department heads on the team.
Representing the department heads?
I assume Mr. Swetlick was representing himself as a department head. So was the sheriff. Well, the sheriff acts like a department head. I'm a department head. Tammy's a department head. It's hard to have everybody on a review team. And we also had midline managers.
And I think that's good. I just think was there any position that, oh, you're representing the department heads?
Well, I don't think that everybody went around the room and said who they're representing. But I think implicitly they're representing their function in the county.
Well, and I would add that's where we have been emailing when we've sent all of the items to administration committee. The same articles have gone out to department heads saying, hey, we know it's short, but please review it. And I think even Supervisor Schoberg and the administration committee said, if your biggest feedback is, whoa, I need more time, let me know. I just received an email similar, like I might need a little bit more time from one department head near the end of last week when I was on vacation, but did not hear from any other department heads. I got comments from many. So I hear what you're saying, and I do believe they have a critical role. Because at the end of the day, besides just myself, yeah, I'm not out there interpreting the policy for every person every day. So I need to make sure the department heads are, and that's why if this is approved today, it won't just be posted to the intranet. I've already kind of worked out a whole communication plan about how will we make employees, supervisors, department heads aware of all of the changes here, whether that's all face-to-face meetings, not just a bunch of lengthy memos, and also creating that annual process, and that's why we did put them as a stakeholder. So anytime there's ever been a handbook review, it's always been sent out, and at department head meetings, there's been conversations saying, we're working on the handbook. Here's the grievance procedure, start looking at it. If you have other specific sections and how it applies to you or your department, please get in touch with me. So I do think we've had that door open. It's always been something that I keep track of when they're working with me, because the handbook used to apply easier to Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We've definitely tried to include the 24/7. Sandy Hackenmuller was getting all of the information to make sure, can the nursing home, can the health center budget handle these changes? And if not, help me understand it so that I can articulate that. So it's definitely a very important point that they continue to be on there. Just as we can't have every staff person, we can't have every department head, but they need to put in their notes. I know Tim Ramberg from the highway has been making sure he has all of his notes and defining how the handbook affects him as well as his own departmental work roles, because keep in mind, departments can have additional work roles as they need to within their own group, how they schedule vacation time, how they handle some other kinds of things. So that's where it talks about department work roles, which are in addition to the handbook.
We've had a lot of discussion on this handbook now. Just want to say, comment, it looks like it's an ongoing process. It isn't going to be just a short, today, they've accomplished a lot. And so if we don't have a lot more discussion, I'd like to move on, but
I just have a short, if I might.
Supervisor Berkey, go ahead.
Chairman Larson. I had a question regarding Article 20 harassment policy, and maybe I just haven't read through enough to understand fully whether or not my question is covered. And that would be in a situation where an employee has been harassed, whether it's sexually or otherwise, is there a policy to include how to make that employee whole if in fact that person has been violated? For instance, time off with pay, treatment, perhaps it's a counseling session or sessions. Is it specific in the policy what is done in the best interest of the employee that's been violated?
Yeah, I've never experienced a policy that defines that, because every situation is so different. In the sexual harassment or other types of harassment investigations and cases that I've had to look into, we always look at, how do we best need to handle that? So sometimes that is immediately putting the person who is the accused out on paid leave to keep them separate. Sometimes if the employee is not to the extent that they're going to be terminated and these two people need to continue to work together, you look at, are there other shifts? Can they? We've done facilitated conversations. We do have employee assistance that allows employees up to 3. So I would say it's not defined in here, but absolutely each circumstance you look at, how do you best provide kind of a good opportunity for those two individuals, and actually those situations affect an entire work unit because it's not usually just between the two immediate parties. So we would look at those, but they wouldn't be defined in the handbook.
So my question is more specific about, and I'll use the word victim. Mm-hmm. How is that employee/victim treated in terms of being made whole due to a circumstance that was out of his or her control? And maybe there needs to be something more specific for that employee.
I don't know that how you would draft that. I would also caution that you don't want to create a right that doesn't already exist in federal law. The employer has the obligation to once they know or should have known about harassment, to put an end to it and to make the employee's work environment safe and comfortable again, and that's the employer's obligation. I don't know how you draft something that guarantees peace and harmony within a work unit, especially if it was unsubstantiated. You know, and if the employee believes that the employer didn't correctly handle the situation, they have legal recourse. I wouldn't want to write that into, and would not recommend writing that into a harassment policy.
There's no, no further questions, or we have a motion on the floor and a second. Motion from Schottner, second from Berkey. So at this time, if there's no further questions, can we vote? And it passed unanimous. Thank you. Thanks for all the work the committees have done on this today, too. That was excellent. County Clerk report.
I have no correspondence, but just for those of you that are attending WCA, you have packets on your desks. That's your confirmation, your registration confirmation, your lodging confirmation. Please take those along with you to the conference. And I don't know if you have, you have anything to say about that, Roger? Your handout on your September.
On the disaster awareness, that's,
They can read it.
what?
You gonna read it, or? They can read it. What? Oh.
Yeah, everybody has this in their packet as far as this disaster awareness, and just take a look at it and be aware of it. And I don't know of any other announcements. Anybody have any announcements that we have to have?
I just want to say one thing. Sure. Earlier in the meeting, I believe it was Supervisor Nielsen who abstained, and he was asked to give a reason. Although the board rules state that he has to give a reason, there's actually federal law that indicates that it would be a violation of a board supervisor's right to remain silent, to state his reasons, and that's why I instructed the chair that he is not required to give a reason, nor do I think that he can be, you know, basically forced to vote. So there's a federal court case that supports that proposition. Thank you.
There's Supervisor Babbitt.
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, when Supervisor Schoberg was talking earlier about the county governance resolution, there was not a motion, but he did make a request to put Norm Matzick's letter into the record, and I'm not sure that we addressed that. And I thought we ought to, in whatever form we need to, make a decision about that.
I don't know if we can do that. Do we have to vote on it? Yeah. Is there an objection to putting that in the record? Yes, Supervisor Nielsen.
Chairman Larson, yes, I would object unless Mr. Matzick is willing to identify himself as a member of a county PAC.
Okay.
Can I make a comment? Only so much that in response to that comment, I would like to make a comment. If we're going to include letters from Chuck Whiting and letters from John Krizik, then why would we not include a letter from Norm Matzik? What's the difference there? It was a guiding, those letters were introduced and are sitting on our, in our official record right now as we speak, simply as an offer to us to look at all of the options that we have before us. So I think it's commendable, quite frankly, that Supervisor Soberg asked that that be put into the record. What harm could it do? It's a part of the official record. I would support that.
Thank you. Troutner.
Also, to reinforce what Supervisor Kiesler has said, if we're going to make it a requirement for citizens that we represent to be part of a PAC, then what is the point of public comment?
Yeah. So we're going to put it in, we have to have a motion to approve it, correct?
Well, I just think it's unusual. Mr. Matzik had the ability to speak at public comment. He didn't. I think the proper disposition of the issue is to have the board vote on Mr. Nielsen's objection.
So,
Can we just make a motion to accept it?
It relates to a topic on the agenda, so there isn't an open meetings issue. Somebody could make a motion, and
Council, we were discussing the topic at that moment in time that I was making my own presentation. I could have invited Mr. Metzen. He's in my district. I could have invited him to speak. Instead, I asked this group to accept his written 2-page memorandum, which is the equivalent of having him stand up and walk us through it. So it would have been a proper course for me to have him recognized and make a presentation, but this is in lieu of that. And I would not be supportive of having people identify all of the different groups that they are members of.
I'll second that.
so it's a motion to introduce it into the record. That's all I'm asking. There's an objection from the body, so I think it needs to be disposed of. It relates to an issue that was on the agenda.
Supervisor Nielsen.
I don't think everybody should have to identify every group that they belong in before they can speak to this committee, but a political action committee is totally different. A political action committee that was involved in electing many members on this board is totally different. And I'm not saying they can't speak. I'm not saying that their documents can't become a record of this county. I'm saying that if it is, it needs to be footnoted saying, I am a member of this political action committee. And that would be my motion, that that letter be footnoted as such.
Supervisor Troutner.
If there's no second to the motion, then the motion dies.
Oh, no, Supervisor Berkey seconded it.
You seconded Nielsen's? Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, now I'm confused.
Motion on the,
What is the motion?
The motion to accept.
yeah, there's a motion to accept and a second on the floor.
Hold on.
What? So,
My comment, I was going to say, if we're going to do that, then what is limiting people to make it a requirement that they have to say every organization they are a part of when they talk? If someone comes up here and they are, a while ago, we had discussion on, during the last session, last board or committee, there was the discussion about guns in various buildings. Should anybody who comes up, if they're a member of a pro or anti-gun committee, should they say that they represent one side or the other, because they are not an official member of that, they are not an official spokesperson of that committee. So forcing people to say that they are parts of a group when they are not the official spokesperson of that group is not good recognition and can open up a lot of legal questions then.
yeah, Supervisor Hanson.
All right. Mr. Matzik did not endorse me. He did not contribute to my campaign. This gentleman comes to so many meetings and contributes in a positive way. Whether or not he's endorsed and contributed to anybody's campaign is a separate issue. I think he deserves to put a piece of his opinion on the public record rather than take what would have been less time than this debate to present it orally. Let's just vote on her.
Well, I'm going to get Supervisor Kiesler first, and I'll be back.
Okay, there's where to start. Mr. Matzik did not ask for his comments to be entered into the record. We had a supervisor of this body ask for it to be put into the record. I think that needs to first be understood. This is, oh my God, that, from my understanding, we have a motion on the floor to put it in to the record, and we have a second. Then we have another motion to have it footnoted without a second. From the process, as I understand it, we need to hear if there's another second. If there's no second, that motion dies. Am I incorrect?
Correct.
Correct.
And then let's just vote on the motion that was on the floor.
Supervisor Nielsen.
I did not make a motion. I said, this is what my idea would be of the proper resolution. So I'm commenting on the motion that is on the floor. And Supervisor Schottner, please don't put words in my mouth. It is totally different when you have a
Talk to me.
political action committee that helped elect you is allowed to address this board and the public without identifying himself as such. I am all for that letter being in the record. That's fine with me. I'm all for Mr. Matzik speaking. But I want my constituents, I want the public to know that who exactly he is and that he has been involved in electing certain individuals to this board. And I feel that way about anybody.
Okay. We have a Supervisor Peterson.
Call the question.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. No more discussion. Second by
Jill?
By Brookie. Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we'll vote on that now. Thanks. And it passed.
I need a copy of that memo. I need a copy of that memo. That's from someone. Okay.
We'll get one for you. There's nothing else on the agenda.
I think we should move to adjourn.
You don't have to. We can
Don't
just
have to. I'm
I
gonna,
suggest we adjourn.
meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It's a good meeting.